Hello everyone, welcome back to my retrospective analysis on the Kingdom Hearts series. This is the second of 11 reviews of my deep dive into the 11 canon games that make up the so-called Dark Seeker saga that spans from the first Kingdom Hearts game to the upcoming Kingdom Hearts 3 early next year. As of July 2018, the hype train for Kingdom Hearts 3 is slowly building after a re-reveal at E3 last month. For those unaware, and as a quick refresher, I view Kingdom Hearts as a series of 3 loose trilogies to better separate how this saga has unfolded. The first act of the Dark Seeker saga I consider to be Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories, and Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. These 3 games tell a pretty solid narrative throughout that details the basics of the universe of the Kingdom Hearts series, establishes the core characters and lore, while still presenting a story that acts very well on its own as a self-contained trilogy. Kingdom Hearts is how all of these would-be franchises should start out. It stood alone just fine if the concept of Disney and Final Fantasy didn't quite take off as it did, but it left just enough dangling plot threads alongside a conceptual secret ending video, and the bittersweet ending left the gates wide open should the game be successful enough to allow the narrative to continue. Fortunately for all involved, the original PlayStation 2 game was a massive success, leading to a Game Boy Advance game that held fans over in 2004 before the third game, the highly anticipated Kingdom Hearts 2, would arrive worldwide in 2006 back on the PS2. Despite the naming scheme, which would become as infamous as the plots going forward, Chain of Memories is essentially the Kingdom Hearts 2 as far as this narrative is concerned. It still stars Sora and picks up directly where the first game ends, setting up the actual Kingdom Hearts 2 very well by addressing aspects of the plot that a player would otherwise be left wondering about. As such, I hope I am able to decently discuss and dissect what makes this particular game more important than its humble beginnings would let on. While this video was infinitely easier to put together, the script came out way longer than anticipated, so let's waste no time and simply dive into this. As before, timestamps will be included in the description for ease of navigation, as this video is way longer than I originally hoped for. Regardless, I hope you enjoy yourself either way. Now for a quick abridged historical context about what led this game to be. After Kingdom Hearts was released in 2002 on the PlayStation 2 and became a worldwide success, all the hopeful planning that went into the international and final mix editions of the original game, regarding sequel bait and plot threads left over from the bittersweet ending, were given the official green light. While Kingdom Hearts 2 wouldn't release for another 3 years, ultimately releasing late in 2005 in Japan, 2006 for the rest of us, it was originally meant to come out having the story experiencing a seemingly shonen-mandated time skip, with a year-long gap between titles originally meant to be left unexplained. During early development, series creator Tetsuya Nomura heard how children wanted to play Kingdom Hearts 2 on Nintendo's Game Boy Advance, the hottest handheld during the 6th generation of systems. While hesitant about how to translate the series' 3D gameplay into 2D on a portable system, Nomura relented and thus Chain of Memories was made. Overall, the game was tweaked to better fit on the GBA, with some pretty great sprite work and presentation all around. Releasing in 2004, Chain of Memories is one of the more impressive advanced games for the 32-bit handheld. It's a pretty solid game, but it wasn't without some setbacks as expected from being released on a handheld instead of a console. That being said, the game was eventually remade into 3D, as is obvious from this footage. Like Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, Rechain of Memories is an updated remake of the original game, redone with a more consistent art style and models to better bridge the gap between the 2 main numbered titles. It's much less jarring now for players jumping in or returning to the series in the 1.5 HD collections, as much of the same controls and feel remains intact here. Being an updated version of the canon, this video will mainly focus on Rechain of Memories, since it adds newer abilities, minor plot development and alterations, and is the title most players will have readily available to them now in 2018 and beyond. No shade on the GBA original though. That was the first Kingdom Hearts game I had beaten completely from beginning to end, so I do have a soft spot for this game in particular. Nevertheless, I'm here to analyze the remake, its strengths, weaknesses, and everything in between, including gameplay and story beats for returning fans, and any newcomers wondering what Recom is all about. I may be biased a little bit, but I'm also upfront and hopefully fair. As you might expect, this is your official spoiler warning for Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories, and by extension, the first Kingdom Hearts as well. As stated earlier, this video is the second of my Kingdom Hearts reviewish videos, so check out my movie-length thoughts on Kingdom Hearts Final Mix if you haven't already. While I'm doing these videos for both newcomers and fans, continuity lockout will begin to take effect from this point onwards in the series. It'll also make more sense as I like to compare how our series progresses. So you do you. I have a playlist of my most recent direct playthrough of the game, so check that out if you can't play it yourself. If you already have played it or simply want to dive into this retrospective properly, let's deep dive into this from the very beginning. The game opens with the usual difficulty settings. Don't worry about this one too much. This game doesn't possess any secret endings to aim for, so pick whatever difficulty you feel is right for you. I know that's vague on a game as different as this, but the descriptors are pretty accurate for this one. You are then presented with the Planet B remix of Simple and Clean as a neat AMV showcases a recap of the previous game's major events. Following right where the ending of Kingdom Hearts left off, Chain of Memories resumes immediately from that optimistic stinger. We follow our protagonists Sora, Donald Duck, and Goofy as they chase Pluto with a letter from King Mickey across a grassy field. Sometime later that night, Sora wakes up to a crossroads, glancing up at the night sky. Behind him, a figure in a black coat similar to the mysterious figure they faced in Hollow Bastion begins to beckon our hero, disappearing and reappearing around the field, claiming something is awaiting Sora, though he will have to lose something dear to him. Making their way down one of the roads, the trio run into a strange castle on the edge of a cliff, its angular vestige taunting the protagonist as if from a twisted fairy tale. Before they have a chance to really think about it, Sora and Donald are drawn towards the building's main door, seemingly responding to something inside. Opening the door to the entrance hall, the party is greeted with a stark white room of marble pillars and faint flower motifs. Discussing how all four of them, including Jiminy Cricket with some significant screen time in this installment, feel an identical calling drawing them towards the castle. Likely not a coincidence, Sora decides to head further into the castle to investigate. Goofy, ever the polite sage of wisdom, proceeds to head towards the entrance to close the front door when a figure in that same black coat appears.
That's it! Who are you?
Yes. Oh yeah? I'll try some magic. Figure! Come on. Figure! Figure! Come on. Figure! Fire! Why isn't it working?
I should think it's obvious. The moment you set foot in this castle, you forgot every spell and every ability you ever knew. In this place, to find is to lose, and to lose is to find. That is the way in Castle Oblivion.
Castle Oblivion?
Playing off Sora's desire to find his best friend Riku, the figure flies through the hero similar to the battle with Unknown, sampling the boy's memories. Producing a card from said memories with a vague proposition, the party proceeds towards the door and the game begins. Immediately evident is how Chain of Memories is structured. As a side note, I'll proceed to largely refer to the game as Chain of Memories for convenience sake, seeing how this video is largely concerned with the 3D remake. In this installment, cards are the literal name of the game. The party's goal is to climb higher and higher through Castle Oblivion, each floor represented as a memory from the previous game. We are presented with a consistent pattern. An introductory cutscene in an entrance hall, typically setting up the current scenario and overarching plot, to then enter the White Rooms themselves as they transform based on a selected world from Sora's memories, where most of the gameplay is then housed. As the player synthesizes rooms to reach story beats, they eventually culminate in a boss fight, leading to the exit hall where a cutscene wraps up the floor's story beats, sometimes with a story-relevant boss fight. Rinse and repeat for most of the game, and there you have it. Chain of Memories is both very story-focused and yet very gameplay-heavy, despite segregating a large chunk of the experience between battle arenas and cutscenes between field exploration. This unique structure makes it very easy for me to divide this video into clear topics of discussion. A large portion of the game's flow is present on 1F, Traverse Town, a recreation of the first hub world of the original Kingdom Hearts. To make this flow more easily, I will front-load this video with how this title operates, since much of the gameplay loop doesn't change dramatically throughout Sora's tale. It will then largely transition into discussing the plot, with the occasional gameplay beats inserted where appropriate, for new gameplay elements or boss fights towards the second half. So let's get to it. As was stated when Sora and company enter the castle, the entire story and gameplay both revolve around memories in the shape of cards. Because Rechain of Memories is a remake of a GBA game, the changes to the gameplay were conscious decisions made to best fit a handheld experience. While the core aspects of the game are retained in its 3D remake, it also better utilizes the technology the jump from the Advance to the PS2 gave the developers, better aligning the controls and presentation to better bridge Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts 2 the game always was. Instead of manufacturing entire worlds on par with the first game, the white rooms the player synthesizes are predetermined areas based on the type of room you select. For instance, the game naturally gives you save points in the entrance hall of each floor and the natural final white room in the form of Conqueror's Respite, after a long ladder up to the exit hall. This means that if you want to save, you must either backtrack to the beginning or ending of a floor, or simply synthesize a save room. When you do, the room will always look identical on the floor it's used on if used consecutively. Sure, the doors to connecting rooms will change depending on where you are on the map, but the rooms themselves will always be consistent, leading the player to pick and choose the rooms they wish to enter if they're smart about their planning. The main world cards are given to Sora over the course of the story. Since they're based around Sora's memories, most of them are synthesized depictions of worlds from the first Kingdom Hearts. You begin in Traverse Town on floor 1 and are then given the rest of the Disney worlds in 2 batches. Agrabah, Olympus Coliseum, Wonderland, Monstro, and Halloween Town can be used in any order on floors 2 through 6, while Atlantica, Neverland, Hollow Bastion, and 100 Acre Wood are used on floors 7 through 10. The final 3 floors are linear due to their story-heavy nature, so the ultimate goal is to make it to the 13th floor. The semi-non-linear nature of the game is appreciated, and only possible because the main plot of the game is told between memory floors, which we'll get to later on. The only real changes in gameplay this choice offers is the floor plan of each floor. The world card chosen only really determines what story and theme gets played during your dungeon crawling-esque journey, so there's no real wrong selection here. I'm boring and like to play the worlds in their given order, but you do you. The choice of world more determines the enemies and bonuses that are available to Sora. 5 of these worlds that give Sora a guest party member in the first game are represented here as friend cards, as well as the only access to Donald and Goofy the player normally has. As the game is a solo venture while traveling through Castle Oblivion otherwise as far as gameplay is concerned. Donald and Goofy are available on all but the 12th floor for story purposes, and the Disney friend cards of Aladdin, Ariel, Jack Skellington, Peter Pan, and Beast are locked to their respective worlds/floors. Pluto is a special friend card that shows up whenever Sora's deck is almost out of cards, more on deck building soon, while the final friend card is the unique and situational Gimmick card, a hidden Mickey trump card that is used on 8 specific boss fights to give the player the upper hand. More on these when discussing said boss fights. Now, of greater importance are the map cards you use to trigger room synthesis. These are separated into 4 types of color-coded cards: red enemy map cards, green status map cards, blue bounty map cards, and yellow key cards. Each is numbered 0 through 9 and are mostly given as rewards after enemy encounters to allow players to continue through a floor. A maximum of 99 is allowed with very little restrictions on how many of each card you are allowed. Of note are what determines what room you can create. When entering a floor, the so-called unknown room you start in, as is any room that you are deposited into if you haven't synthesized one after certain story beats, you must create a room that costs at least 1. The cost of the doors in the room you synthesized is thus the value of the card used plus 1, so using a 1 will have doors costing at least 2 in the next room, while using a 5 will jump the door cost to 6 and above. When using a 9, the doors must then accept a 0 only, which will then reset the connecting rooms back down to 1. You can resynthesize any room you choose by selecting the door instead of passing through it, for grinding opportunities or entering specific rooms for saving, buying and selling new cards, or just simply triggering rewards. So with a bit of planning, you'll never be locked out of progress with a careful eye on your map cards. Now onto the map cards themselves. Beginning with the red cards, these affect how Heartless behave as well as the number of enemies and size of the room itself. Tranquil Darkness serves as the default type of room, as unknown rooms are most like this default card. From this standard, all the other cards adjust accordingly. Teeming Darkness is a massive room with the most amount of Heartless. Feeble Darkness and Almighty Darkness decrease and increase the enemy's attacks by 2 respectively, more on this later. Sleeping Darkness is a small room where all Heartless are asleep and thus immobilized, while Looming Darkness generates a large room where all enemies aggressively home in on the player. Rounding out the remainder of the enemy map cards are the more specialized rooms. A premium room often gives Sora a chance at a premium bonus. Again, this relates to the battle system. White and black rooms appropriately house white mushrooms and black fungi respectively. Bottomless Darkness are pitch black rooms filled with many pureblood Heartless, and the roulette room allows the greatest chance to select your map cards via a roulette bonus. In regards to the roulette room, that's the one set of cards I suggest every player collect and use, since it allows you to select from a predetermined group of cards that you can easily game. While the roulette is visible, the player is allowed to see how many of each type of card they possess, so it's very easy to fill out missing gaps in your map cards, which is vital for the special yellow keycard doors. My advice is to try and have 2 of each type of card so you're never caught unprepared, focusing on more lower numbered cards than higher when given the chance, as 0 cards can reset their linked rooms, requiring less hassle when higher values are needed. Next up are the green status map cards, which grant various buffs to the hero. Martial Waking increases the value of your attack cards, Sorcerous Waking similarly boosts your magic cards, while Alchemic Awakening does the same for your item cards. Meeting Ground increases the drop rate of friend cards, Stagnant Space cuts Heartless movements on the field by half, Strong Initiative deals major initial damage to Heartless if you get the jump on them, while Lasting Daze likewise stuns Heartless when entering a battle. These are useful on specific floors versus enemies that are giving you a hard time by leveling the playing field or adjusting to your style of deck building, so it's all good. The third blue group of bounty map cards range from expected bonus rooms to breathing rooms. The trio of bonus cards are Calm Bounty, Guarded Trove, and False Bounty rooms, granting Sora a free treasure, one's guarded by Heartless, and a room with fake chests alongside a real one. These are useful since each floor grants various bonuses, so it's worth using this card once on every floor for these freebies. The non-bounty based rooms are Moment's Reprieve, which is your requisite save room, Mingling World synthesizes a random room, and Moogle rooms, which serve the card collecting aspect of the game, where you can buy card packs, sell cards you own to trade in for new ones, all using their own currency. Resist the urge to talk about how this stuff has been in game's property, but the last remaining card is the Random Joker, which is exactly what it sounds like. It will satisfy any room criteria barring keycards, and will thus synthesize a random room if used on non-specialized doors. Speaking of, keycards are the final yellow group of map cards. Progressing through most floors, the hero is given 1 to 3 of these special cards, each triggering an aspect of the story in each memory world. Usually in this order, the 3 cards are the Key of Beginnings, Guidance, and Truth, with at least one leading towards a boss fight of some kind. The 4th type of keycard is the Key to Rewards, a special golden card that drops from the 7th floor onwards, and of which only 1 is allowed in Sora's map cards at a time. My advice is to ignore most of the Key to Rewards on your first go through the game. There's multiple reasons for this recommendation, which I'll address towards the end of Sora's story. Otherwise, that's all the map cards you'll become very familiar with, so next is on to the majority of the remaining cards, the aptly named battle cards, and thus the combat system. While exploring on the maps, Sora is able to hit and lightly interact with certain objects, like hitting barrels, smashing other small destructible objects according to the floor's world theme, and jumping on specific platforms. These can produce various HP and Moogle Point orbs, as well as various free battle cards if you track them down before they disappear, so it's worth indulging in the base satisfaction of smacking things around as you cross these rooms. I always took its take to combat similar on its surface level to the Super Mario RPG game's approach, where you can preemptively attack the Heartless on screen to get in a free initial hit. It does the JRPG thing of being sucked into a cosmic nether plane into a themed area based on the room and situation instead of using the maps themselves, a remnant of originally being a Game Boy Advance title. You can escape most fights by pushing against the ends of the arena for a few seconds if you really can't be bothered or in a hurry. The extra freedom is appreciated compared to the GBA original though, Heartless behaving almost identically to the first game. Having them all rendered to proper scale with similar controls is a definite plus, so a player can then focus on the intricacies of how combat has changed for this title. Now for the combat system itself. Instead of being able to attack freely, each of Sora's actions are tied to cards as expected, all numbered 0 through 9, as are the map cards. The basic 3-hit combo is accessible by using separate attack cards in the form of various Keyblades, largely from the first game. Each type of Keyblade has different stats, 3 of them corresponding to the basic 3-hit combo Sora can perform, being Strike, Thrust, and Combo Finish, which become more effective if you place them accordingly with some prior setup. The other characteristics used are swing speed, break recovery, and CP cost. Generally speaking, the better a card is, the more CP it costs. That's how decks are also balanced. Card points limit the amount of cards Sora can put in his deck, so you can't simply throw a whole bunch of 9-value attack cards from the get-go. When leveling up, Chain of Memories is an anomaly as far as games I've played are concerned, in where you physically have to chase down experience in the form of gems dropped in battle. It's possible to actually miss a ton of experience over the course of the game if you don't take the time to gather them, so that's something, I guess. I can't think of another RPG that makes you gather XP after you kill your foes like this. I don't know, I find that kind of interesting. Anyways, every level up gives Sora a choice between 3 bonuses: hit points, card points, and slights. HP is pretty self-explanatory, as well as CP, both of which have eventual limits as you reach max level if you're trophy hungry. Slights are essentially the combat abilities from the first game, which I'll address soon, and are given in a set order at specific levels. So if you ignore slight bonuses for 20 levels, you'll be able to consecutively learn them if HP or CP is that important to you. Basic attack cards are gathered from interacting with the environments on the map screens, as well as getting them in card packs from Moogles. Once you reach a certain world, like Olympus Coliseum, every floor from then on has the chance to drop both the basic Kingdom Key as well as Olympia, so if that somehow determines the order you do the worlds, then there you go. Some are offered in bounty rooms, and some of the strongest are available in the key to rewards rooms, while others are simply story-based. Typical stuff, and it does lead the game to have a little bit more thought put into its battle system than the first game. I actually do spend the time organizing my deck as best as possible to maximize Sora's 3-hit combo as well as slights, which I might as well get around to now. As you can move around the arenas, you use the shoulder buttons to cycle through your deck, most relevant information displayed on the HUD thanks to the extra real estate offered by a console remake, as well as utilizing a proper controller full of buttons to help ease the cramps the GBA games sometimes gave you in heated battles. Instead of using each card one at a time, you can stock up to 3 cards at a time for easy use. The benefits are to make you largely more immune to card breaks. See, in battle, the card values determine what attack continues, is nullified, or is straight up interrupted. While lower value cards are cheaper and can fill up a deck nicely, they're easily broken against tougher enemies. If you play a card worth 4 and the enemy also plays a 4, both of your attacks are negated. If they play a 5 or above, your card is broken and you are stunned for a few seconds depending on the card that was countered, leaving you potentially wide open for an attack. To help minimize this risk, you can stock up to 3 cards whose values are then totaled up, giving you a total value anywhere from 0 to 27. So for most Mook fights, if you're like me, you can make a deck based entirely around this concept, and regularly stock up attacks worth at least 10, making you immune to most card breaks against Heartless. To balance stocking out, the first card you use in this method is then lost, unable to be used again for the rest of the fight through normal means. Normally when using cards, once you reach the end of your deck, have no more cards to use, or simply want to reuse the moves you've already done, Sora must focus on a reload card, requiring a few seconds to reload your deck to continue the fight. Each use takes a little bit longer until the 3rd reload, only a real issue during longer fights against a ton of Heartless, or boss fights in particular. He normally cannot move during this, so it exemplifies the interesting mix of semi-turn-based and real-time Chain of Memories combat kind of represents. It's not truly turn-based at all, I know it's kind of silly. It's more akin to the classic active time battle system half of the mainline Final Fantasy series is fond of, but it does make you think on multiple levels during the more involved fights, learning to time your attacks and being simultaneously aware of the battle at hand. But what's the benefit of stocking lower cards, I hear you ask? Well, that's where slights come in. Isn't sleight of hand, get it? As you progress through the game, Sora will learn various slights, attacks triggered by stocking specific card combinations. The basis ones are abilities based on offensive abilities largely introduced in Kingdom Hearts' final mix, each triggered by a specific sequence of cards and values. For instance, Sliding Dash is triggered by stocking 3 cards of the same type, same Keyblade basically, that total between 10 and 15, and you lose the ability to reload the first card in that slight. Conversely, if you stock 3 cards totaling 10 to 15 of different card types, it instead triggers Blitz, which uses timed presses to execute correctly, a nice bridge to how Kingdom Hearts 2 is infamous for mash X, sometimes triangle, and I'll get to that on the next video. This is how you also trigger Stun Impact, Strike Raid, Zentetsuken, Sonic Blade, Ars Arcanum, Ragnarok, and Trinity Limit. Ars Arcanum in particular is a nice rapid-fire 13-hit combo that can easily waste weaker stunned Heartless, but since it triggers on a 1 through 6 total, stronger Heartless and enemies will more easily break you, so it's all about how you choose to battle. Zentetsuken also triggers on both 0 and 27, and if it's pulled off successfully, you will break an opponent's card and render it unplayable for the rest of the match. Risk-reward and all that. It's a pretty interesting way to encourage strategy in setting up a deck, of which you can set up 3. Whenever I played for trophies, I typically had my main deck designed mainly for slights, one used for experience grinding, relying on abusing Mega Flare, a tactic that will resurface in a future game, and a third one mainly for specific boss fights, which is something I didn't do this time around in my most recent playthrough to showcase the limits of relying morely on one kind of deck. Allocating a specific card to be a shortcut helps mainly for emergencies when healing is necessary, but clever deck building will go a long way in this game. The only thing weird about slights I've noticed is that there's no combination totaling 16 through 19, which is curious since Sliding Dash and Blitz both share the 10 through 15 range, only difference being the types of Keyblade cards used to trigger it. Why they don't have Blitz fall under the 16 through 19 range is somewhat curious, but I'm guessing it was likely done to keep it accessible for lower CP, so it's nothing but an observation. Outside of the red attack slights, they also apply to other types of cards. Magic returns in their own blue style of card, with all 7 types of magic returning from the first game. They all function the same aside from Arrow, which now summons a focused tornado instead of being a windshield. While using a single card gives you the base spell, for instance Fire, if you stock 2 or 3, you upgrade the spell's effectiveness, Fira and Firaga respectively. Makes sense. The more specific slights are ones that combine multiple types of cards, many of which are earned through bounties and rewards, leveling up, or otherwise completing certain objectives in the story, such as taking the time to do minigames in the 100-Acre Wood, or defeating bosses, or simply reaching certain story beats. Many of these either magnify your damage output or otherwise inflict status effects on opponents, which are much more prevalent in Chain of Memories. Confusion causes enemies to attack less often, while it screws up the player's movement controls if inflicted on you, or having days from card breaks or being frozen actually halting the player's control of the protagonist. Some of it's simple, like changing Strike Raid's effects. Fire, Thunder, and Blizzard Raids are self-explanatory, as well as Gravity and Stop Raid producing similar effects. Some of these are insanely powerful, like the aforementioned Mega Flare, or specialized attacks like Homing Firaga and Holy. I don't tend to use them much, but the variety of attacks are appreciated, as many of these attacks will show up in future games and get more exposure there. Sharing the blue color with Magic are summon cards, with the same 6 characters also returning from the first installment. We do, however, get a new addition here, being Cloud of Final Fantasy VII fame. Despite my headcanon that Cloud is Sora's Super Saiyan 2 transformation, he's actually pretty useful for Mook fights if you can stock him up. Cross Slash and Omni Slash are good methods to hack away at earlier mobs, as well as some of the tougher Heartless like Defenders and Aqua Tanks. And each of the commands, alongside certain abilities like Sonic Blade and Ars Arcanum, requires specific timing of triangle to continue the move. This is the next logical step following the first game's approach, as well before reaction commands make their proper debut in the next game. Requiring players to not only set up their deck beforehand by paying attention to card values, and then multitasking in battles, does a fair job at trying to counter the Mash X to win mantra this series isn't wrongfully accused of. I know that this approach of requiring a break into the menus before diving into the action proper isn't for everyone, but as my footage shows, you can turn this into the prequel to Kingdom Hearts 2 that I do. Mash triangle to win. But I earned that right, so it's not really a dock against the game, since it's up to the player to choose to attack like this. It's all about player freedom. This works for friend cards as well. The more you stack, the more powerful and longer their moves are. Pretty straightforward. Add to that, you can simply stock any 3 cards together in order to attempt a run through all 3. Or 2, and even 1 card, since you can trigger a stock at any time by mashing both shoulder buttons simultaneously, in order to ensure you, say, for example, both heal and use an item to reload your deck against mooks with less risk of being broken. This is more difficult to do against more powerful enemies or against bosses specifically, since the 0 value card is important here. As the game details, it is the most powerful and weakest card at the same time. Similar to how it can be used to reset the White Room values, be it any value from 1 to 27, a 0 card will always win. Useful during boss fights to break enemy slights thrown at you. However, the 0 card can also be broken by anything. If you play it too early, any card can break it, leaving you extremely vulnerable and being potentially lethal if mistimed during the tougher boss fights. All of these factors make for an interesting combat system, at least as far as an attempt to switch things up for a handheld system and make it more than just mashing attack to win. It requires you to fiddle with your attacks and thus decks to progress, and I enjoyed the effort into making the experience link thematically, going so far as to base the blueprint of both the gameplay and story around the concept of cards. I appreciate story-informing gameplay here, even if I understand that some don't like how the story and gameplay is often segregated in many Japanese RPGs. Especially here in Chain of Memories, as you explicitly warp into a separate battle screen. I'm more willing to suspend my disbelief for this to happen here, since Castle Oblivion does have weird floors that change based on memories, plus this is still a game series with a 14-year-old anime protagonist running around with Donald and Goofy beginning to dive into existential drama, so what does that mean? You know, despite the fact that I'm using an in-universe excuse for this common complaint. It means you can do a lot by setting a consistent tone and level of charm and competency. While it's okay for a series to be wacky as it wants to be, you do need to lay down some ground rules. Yes, Kingdom Hearts deals with personified darkness creatures that seek out the hearts of all beings and even worlds, but since it was established so early on in the first game, the series assumes on some level that you're on board with it. Heck, you're likely also on board with the concept of characters that will be able to hop between worlds original and Disney-based while solving problems with a giant key-shaped sword. The series' entire core concept is based on the most curious east and west blending of fairy tale logic and anime escalation. The story and especially characters would not be as beloved as they are if they weren't taking some aspect of storytelling seriously despite the ridiculous concept. And I am all about this nonsense. Let's round out the remainder of the battle cards. Aside from the aforementioned magic and summon cards are 2 special cards added exclusively for 100 Acre Wood in a specific minigame, so I'll deal with that later, and the green item cards. They remain the 7 staple items from the first game. Potions instantly reload all reloadable attack cards to bypass reloading manually. High Potions improve upon the basic potion by reloading all attack cards, with the Mega Potion not only reloading every attack card, but also resets the reload counter as well. These are super useful for attack-based slights against most mobs, so thumbs up here. On the magic side, we have Ethers and Mega Ethers, which do the same restore magic cards thing for the former and also resets the reload counter on the latter. The best items are obviously the Elixir and Mega Elixir cards. Elixirs reload every type of card in your deck, which is fantastic, while a Mega Elixir reloads everything as well as resets the reload counter. As you might expect, the best cards are super expensive deck-wise, but stocking at least one type of Elixir alone will greatly boost your options, especially on slight-heavy builds like I tend to rely on. While this covers most of the basics of combat, I have yet to mention the black enemy cards, which are so special they're accessible only through a separate deck menu in battle. These special cards give temporary effects under specific conditions that can drastically benefit a player under specific circumstances or just to screw around with. You gain the majority of enemy cards by defeating Heartless, the chance of their card appearing based on the final enemy defeated in a combat scenario. Most bosses in the game will drop their respective enemy cards through the story, while the remaining cards are gained under special circumstances that I'll get to later. Every Heartless has its own corresponding enemy card, so all you fellow 100% completionists are in for a bit of a post-game with this one. They don't share any values, so you can trigger them whenever you wish. A few of these are simply modifiers, such as Shadow's Incrementer, which gives all of your cards +1 value, which lasts for 2 reloads, meaning Shadow is quite useful at all points of the game. Conversely, Power Wild's Retrograde reverses the value of all cards for you and your enemies, so a 1 becomes a 9, 2 becomes an 8, and so on, with 5 and 0 remaining unaffected, which lasts for 1 reload, making Power Wild a decent trump card when used strategically for certain battles. These passive powers can range from simple elemental magic boosts, slightly extending your attack reach for 30 attacks, or preventing your stock cards from being used up for slights up to 5 times. No matter how you play, there's an enemy card out there for you, if you remember that they exist. I honestly tend to forget them, but that doesn't mean they aren't useful. I'm simply kind of stubborn and enjoy throwing out constant slights, since CP is precious during the critical story path. Some of these straight up gives a player access to staple abilities from the series. Hook grants you Second Chance, a vital ability in Kingdom Hearts that keeps you alive as long as you have 2 HP remaining up to 3 times. Creeper Plant houses Leaf Bracer, which allows a cure spell to go on unimpeded for 1 reload, and Soldier grants you Combo Plus, giving you a 4-hit combo that lasts for 3 reloads. All the options are available for you to use or ignore as you see fit, as this covers just about every aspect of the basic combat in Recon. I'll address some specificities as I hit them, but getting most of the gameplay details out of the way right now makes this much more simple from a review perspective. This is the majority of the game right here. Touching back upon CP for a moment, that's where the special premium card bonuses come into play. Every so often, you'll pick up a small gold icon similar to the silver roulette icon that triggers a roulette of your current deck. Selecting a card during this will turn it into a premium card, a gold-numbered and glossy card that drastically lowers its CP cost at the exchange of being a one-use card. This means it cannot be reloaded again without the use of an item, though this can be circumvented by being the second or third in a stock or slight. Basically, I find them most useful as either a 0 value card, since zeros are the highest value of any type of card, so it saves you a ton of CP, or using them in the beginning of a slight, since they're not meant to be reloadable under normal circumstances anyways. It's generally advised not to take them unless you know what you're doing, but it's a viable option regardless. Plus, premium cards are also obtainable on the field or through Moogle packs, so you'll likely run into at least a few of these. How useful they are depends on your playstyle. If what I spent the last 30 paragraphs describing sounds interesting or fun to you, Shadow Memories might be right up your alley. The extra buttons on a full controller really does lessen the cramp-inducing control scheme of the original GBA title, and it gives those who want more than mash attack of the main games some sort of new rules to adapt to. I acknowledge quite a few players, vets and newcomers alike, simply can't quite grasp their head around the altered gameplay, and that's completely fair. Kingdom Hearts, by the very nature of its own existence by mixing Final Fantasy and Disney elements together, appeals to a much wider audience than most other properties. Its crossover DNA both appeals to those who like JRPGs, especially those by Squeenix, and all the anime craziness that entails, alongside the much wider audience that enjoys Disney properties, and would play a game solely because one or more of their favorite characters, or movies and shows, are an appealing enough prospect to try something new out, even if it is a crazy JRPG. So depending on what you enjoy about Kingdom Hearts, Recom may be one of the best or worst titles in the series. It has a few barriers to entry, namely in its gameplay structure, which requires some degree of planning and awareness of multiple factors beyond the first game. I personally find the card-based systems entertaining, as it accomplishes the same sort of role-playing progression systems I love RPGs for inherently, albeit in a different way than the first game did. If paying attention to a reactionary number-based card game sounds daunting, it's likely because it can be. A well-prepared deck is crucial to how much trouble you'll find the game itself, as some of the later bosses straight up cheat in certain aspects, but that's wholly dependent on how much of the game systems click with you. This sounds mind-numbingly self-explanatory, but it's not something that I can easily recommend since I can't think of many other games that are remotely similar to this one. I obviously recommend any newcomer of the title to try it out, especially since the HD Remix collections are an easily available measure. And if they don't find the combat fun or intuitive, there's always watching the cutscenes or a playthrough online. And hey, I happen to do just that, and there are plenty of other fine long plays of Recom should the gameplay simply not appeal to everyone. Because if nothing else, the story is the most important takeaway from this title, as even though it began as a handheld bridge between Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, do not fall into the trap that the game is thus unimportant. I've reiterated this before many times, and I'll continue doing so until the end of time. I remember the confusion players had going into Kingdom Hearts 2 without knowing a thing about Chain of Memories events. That was just one title that made a chunk of its sequel confusing for many without any context. Imagine the popcorn I'll be preparing when those who jump from Kingdom Hearts 2 to 3, or who have never touched the series before, without knowing an iota of the 7 to 10 games before those main installments, are going to jump into.
Now that you mention it, I was kind of thinking the same thing.
Seriously? Me too.
If you made it this far into the video, you either are curious of my opinion, like to hear someone ramble on about things he likes, or genuinely are here and heeding my advice. Either way, thank you, I really appreciate it. Speaking of the story, now's the time where I almost exclusively focus on exactly that. Since I consider Chain of Memories to be one of the better written and presented stories in the series, I'm going to have fun completely going over all the little details I enjoy, and all the character moments held within. Buckle up, because this is where the series' signature convolutedness really begins to show its hand, and I'm going to have a blast going over this.
Where are you going?
That way, to the door. Are you scared?
Ah, don't be ridiculous. Come on, let's go, Goofy.
Hey, fellers, shouldn't we shut the door behind us before we go?
We left off right at the beginning, so a quick recap is in order. Sora, Donald, and Goofy discover a castle teetering on the edge of an abyss chasing after Pluto. All three feel a subconscious urge to go through the entrance doors, only to be encountered by a mysterious figure in a black cloak, similar to the one they ran into previously in Hollow Bastion that tested them. Once inside, they forgot most of their combat abilities with a vague promise of recovering something they need at the cost of something dear to them. Being given a card of Traverse Town, Sora steps through the first door of Castle Oblivion into blinding light, and the game begins. The figure explains that the Traverse Town Sora sees isn't real, and is instead made from his memory of the town. Jiminy chimes in that Donald and Goofy are also missing, much to Sora's dismay, being at the mercy of the cards. What follows is a very brief tutorial on the basic combat mechanics, of which I pretty much already covered. Once complete, Donald and Goofy return in their Kingdom Hearts attire, confused and at a loss remembering what happened once Sora opened the door to a strange light. Jiminy laments having holes in their memories, as he apparently keeps track of events by asking each party member of their events and memories to keep his journal up to date, the first volume of which we learn he completed before reaching Castle Oblivion, conveniently covering the first game's events. Being warned that Sora walks alone from here on out, basically in reference to the gameplay's singular nature, hooray story-informing gameplay, the game then proceeds to tutorialize most of the overworld mechanics of hitting objects and preemptively striking Heartless and synthesizing rooms. The story progresses with Donald and Goofy randomly spawning behind Sora, the trio still getting used to the random nature of how Castle Oblivion works. Going further into Traverse Town, the trio run across Pluto, confused as to what he's doing inside the castle. While Goofy states there's nothing confusing about Pluto showing up in Traverse Town due to them departing on their journey with them, Jiminy confirms for the audience that they did indeed leave with the yellow dog, even if they, as well as the audience, might be forgiven in forgetting that fact, as the first game did indeed have him drop out of the plot until the very end. After reenacting conversations about the deeper lore elements of Kingdom Hearts, the party runs into Leon, who has seemingly forgotten their names. With no memory of being in a castle and with no recollection of Sora, more confusion is had as Leon suddenly addresses Sora by name, confusing them all further in the process. Yuffie arrives as well, taking this all in stride like half the audience will anyways, and suggests they roll with the punches, as it's easiest to not think about it and it saves time introducing everyone to each other. Good attitude, Yuffie. The game then gives a brief combat tutorial, of which the player will have already been given a crash course into by the time this cutscene plays, and they proceed into the second story beat on the first floor. Meeting up with Aerith, she leads with a relatable, "I don't know whether to say nice to meet you or good to see you again," which nicely mirrors the general audience at this stage. Cameos are neat. Through a quick exchange of Sora reciting the more important story beats from the first game, the Final Fantasy characters remember as well, Aerith coming to the conclusion that Sora's heart is doing the remembering for them. Too uncanny to brush off as mere coincidence, they proceed to direct the party towards Sid at the plaza, remembering that Sora is looking for a friend. Once meeting up with the curmudgeonly airship pilot, Sid gives a loose retelling of the fact that guard armor showed up once the bell rings, and lo and behold, it occurs here, leading to the first real boss fight of the game. Guard armor functions pretty identically to its battles in the first game. Sora must focus on destroying it limb from limb, being wary of its few high-value attacks, while being given the entire plaza to face the Heartless similar to the first real encounter. This is where gimmick cards come in handy, as they basically give the player massive advantages in the battles they appear in, which is in most boss fights. During this battle, the green hidden Mickey immediately disassembles guard armor, leaving Sora to wail away without repercussions, making this a difficult fight to lose as long as the player isn't mindlessly wasting their cards. Gimmick cards are also unbreakable even though they're listed as value 0 cards, since they also stop time for the enemy, meaning they're perfect trump cards whenever a player wishes to use them. Soon enough, the armor will fall again, and the story resumes after gathering its enemy card. The Final Fantasy characters meet up with the party after the commotion, and wish the protagonists good luck in finding their friends, who know they won't get anywhere attempting to explain how Castle Oblivion apparently operates memory-wise, having not fully realized it themselves. Turning to leave, Aerith seems to hang back to remind Sora that both this version of Traverse Town and even herself are merely figments of his memories, despite being able to talk with him now. Despite Sora having trouble rationalizing this, as the kid cares just too dang much, to his credit, she warns him of his character flaw, to beware his memories. This exchange signals to the player their hunch of being cautious going forward is likely the wisest decision, as Donald and Goofy return to find Sora talking to himself, the Aerith he was speaking to never actually there. Ooh. Emerging at the end of the first floor, Sora, Donald, and Goofy are greeted by the hooded figure once again, Sora asking him what he really wants from them despite the brief pseudo-reunion the trio just partook on the ground floor. Before getting any clear answer, a newcomer warps onto the scene, clad in a similar black cloak, wielding spiky red hair and overflowing with personality. On edge, Sora witnesses the unhooded figure chastise his associate on
the hero.
Then perhaps you'd like to test him.
Perhaps I would. My show now, Keyblade Master. Who am I? Oh, my name's Axel. Got it memorized? Sure. Good. You're a quick learner. So, Sora, now that we're getting to know each other better... Don't you go off and die on me now.
And just like that, Sora's thrown into another boss fight. Axel is fire-based and isn't much more aggressive compared to guard armor, but this is the first time the player is thrown against another human opponent with their own deck of cards. This is where an eagle-eyed player will see that the face of the card used corresponds to the attack that they're going to perform, but in general it won't matter too much. You are only witness to one card at a time, and they're able to bust out slights themselves, with Firewall being the only thing to worry about in this battle. easily breakable with a solid 0 if you've wisely added 1 or 2 to your deck by this point. Your video game instinct may kick in and realize Axel's extremely weak to ice, so fire off blizzards for a pretty quick victory, gaining the fire spell as a reward.
Give me a break.
Afterwards, Sora discovers more world cards left behind, as just as the party realizes they're the only way to reliably move forward, Axel reappears, reiterating the riddle that they were led here with.
Did you really think after that introduction I would give up oh so easily?
You were testing us.
And you passed. Congratulations, Sora. You're ready now. Ready to take on Castle Oblivion. You will need to follow your memories. Trust what you remember and seek what you forget. Then you will find someone very special.
You mean King Mickey and Riku?
You will just have to give some more thought to who it is that's most important to you.
After some Harry Potter-level word trickery and a familiar gesture, Sora rejects Axel's help, much to his amusement, though he does leave with yet another warning.
Just what I'd expect from the Keyblade Master. But be forewarned. When your sleeping memories awaken, you may no longer be who you are now.
Once controls return to the player, and quick optional chats with Goofy and Donald ensue, another set of cutscenes play, and the pattern of progression is set in stone, with the game warning that leaving a floor will reset the synthesized rooms. Once reaching the second floor, and the warp point is introduced to jump between completed floors, the player is then free on selecting between Agrabah, Olympus Coliseum, Wonderland, Monstro, and Halloween Town in any order they choose to progress through for floors 2 through 6. Now I'll take a brief dive into the gameplay on these floors, namely focusing on the specific differences each offer, since the actual battling and semi-dungeon crawling aspects are pretty identical throughout each floor. And I'll be going into their default order because it really doesn't matter plot-wise which one is done in what order. Most all of the plot-relevant details that really matter largely occur in Castle Oblivion itself before and after each memory floor. This is helped by 95% of all voiced cutscenes taking place outside of the returning worlds, the rest being simple text-based scenes. Starting off in Agrabah, the party is immediately greeted with a Heartless fight, rescuing Aladdin, who decides to test out the Genie of the Lamp and gets rid of the seemingly endless Heartless chasing them. The loose story of the world is a Cliff Notes retelling of the events from the first game and film. Aladdin finds the genie, wants to stop Jafar from taking over Agrabah, learns of the 3-wish limitation, wants treasure to meet Princess Jasmine, yada yada yada. Aladdin's friend card summons him to use Sandstorm, where he wields a scimitar around homing in on enemies and producing Moogle points. An easy way to grind for them if you want more cards at Moogle shops this early in the game. All in all, the plot's not too relevant this early on, as the second encounter has the party rescuing Jasmine, Jafar summoning Heartless in an attempt to make Aladdin use up all his wishes. Eventually just stealing her away, Sora eventually confronts Genie Jafar in a simplified shifting stage similar to the first game's arena. The gimmick card locks all 6 platforms in place here, so Sora can wheel properly on the lamp that Iago has, since you once again fight Jafar indirectly. Honestly, the platforms can block most of Jafar's attacks, meaning the difficulty is simply not getting dropped off a platform to reach Iago, who doesn't try as hard in this one to avoid you like he at least attempted in the first game. Peace is restored and the party moves on with Jafar Genie enemy card and a summon card for the blue genie itself. Not too complicated for a first round world, especially on floor 2. Next up I chose Olympus Coliseum, in which the Olympus Coliseum Survival Cup is currently being held. The preliminary course of which is basically a free-for-all race to the finish to essentially see who battles Hercules, even though you don't actually do any racing. Hades appears with a duped Cloud in tow, the brooding soldier following along with promises of restoring his lost memories, similar to Sora. All the contestants show up, and during the second story encounter, Sora learns that Cloud is here to take Hercules' life, as per Hades' prior deal like in the first game. They fight the Final Fantasy VII protagonist, who fights pretty much identically to his Kingdom Hearts appearance, relinquishing the High Potion item card, and are then left to chase after him post-defeat. The party then catches up to Hades and his boss fight ensues, also not much different from the first game's encounter with the Lord of the Dead. Most of these early fights are more dependent on your variety of cards in your decks, but otherwise there's no real big surprises to be had here since Hades doesn't fight with any gimmick to abuse beyond firepower, Blizzard being the go-to spell here. Sora sympathizes with Cloud's wish of regaining his own memories, and they gain him as a summon, ending the world with at least some sort of meta-plot tie-in. As an aside, I mentioned in the Kingdom Hearts Final Mix video, Deep Jungle is completely scrubbed from Chain of Memories, as well as the rest of the series. The games can easily rationalize its lack of showcasing as the party simply forgetting the world while corresponding to the real-world excuse that Squeenix lost the rights to reuse the world or the Tarzan characters. As such, most of the enemies seen in that world are given to others, namely Olympus Coliseum here, if you enjoy those accursed Monkey Heartless. This is one of those real-life issues interfering with art things, but I don't think anyone really feels the absence of Deep Jungle at all that much here, despite me loving Tarzan the film. It's just one of those, hey, we managed to work in something in case someone who likes continuity is wondering about this sort of thing. And obviously I am. Back to your regularly scheduled video on what's actually in the game. Wonderland was my next stop, and this basically is a straight-up retelling of the courtroom scene once again. The maps here at least have some sort of bare-bones interaction to them, requiring the player to dispel dark vines by smashing a purple flower before being able to leave, but otherwise it's filled with the usual flowers containing potential goodies, mushroom trampolines, and the themed Heartless based on the world you loaded on the floors. Speaking of Heartless, 3 species make their proper debut here, the rest appearing in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix. Creeper Plant, Crescendo, and Tornado Step, all of which debut here in Wonderland. It's nice to get some new Heartless to show up in a game that's mostly doing the Metal Gear Solid 2 thing of invoking the previous entry, albeit in a similar meta way that benefits the story overall, so I don't think it's quite the rehash it can come across at first glance. The plot of Wonderland also has connections to the overarching plot in the castle, where Alice uses the Queen of Hearts' faulty memory, of which she accuses Alice of stealing away, against her by playing off of false memories. Knowing the Queen would be too prideful to admit she ever forgot something sticks with Sora and should stick with the player, hint hint nudge nudge. Anyways, the gameplay highlights feature the usual card soldier mob fight as well as the memory rematch of the Trickster Heartless boss, and this is where my stubborn reliance on a singular strategy actually kinda hurt me. Relying on sleights this early on in the game was to my detriment, as Trickster possesses very high value cards for a 4th floor encounter. This requires some careful consideration on my part, as many of my combos are easily broken since I also didn't have a large pool of CP at my disposal. Some of the attacks are telegraphed well enough and are easily blockable, but it is worth noting that some of these larger fights require more strategy than spam sleights, like I prefer to do. Though now's a good time to mention that, if you ever do get low on cards due to them being broken or through the constant use of sleights, Pluto has a chance of appearing, and if successful, will dig up your lost cards for you so you aren't completely SOL. The gimmick card will return the table and chair for easy access to the boss if it disappears, while also stunning Trickmaster for some freebie hits. Otherwise, it doesn't have a ton of HP and is easy enough to defeat even if you have to chip away at it and be a little patient to do it. I then let the game decide that Monstro was my memory of Floor 5, handling a similar plot of the game, Sans Riku, and more so focusing on the film's plot of getting the whale of a whale to sneeze out Pinocchio and his family. It similarly sees Jiminy have the spotlight here, as he does throughout much of Chain of Memories actually, being a welcome addition to the decisions and discussion that the party has, unlike the first game, where he was mostly forgotten about outside of the Pinocchio-related scenes and jotting down various information in his journal. More on that when I deal with the meta plot, but here it's pretty simple. Jiminy's Pinocchio's conscience, but realizes that he's largely walking the straight and narrow without him. The second story beat houses the Parasite Cage encounter similar to the first game, in where the acid in the level is a much more present and lethal threat here. Not only do you have to keep Sora on 4 small rotating platforms amidst a sea of stomach acid, but Parasite Cage has high value cards that a player may not be fully ready to deal with, alongside multitasking Sora's position and the ever constant damage the green liquid presents. It's quite a challenging fight, especially if you're stubborn like me and focus on attacking while also harming Sora recklessly. The gimmick card both stuns the Heartless and eliminates the acid for a brief respite, but is otherwise stationary and unique for being a Key of Guidance boss fight. High jump is gained in the first story beat similar to the original game, so you aren't completely without new options to deal with hazards and attacks here. The Key to Truth ends with a set piece in which the player is given 2 minutes to defeat Shadows in Monstro's Belly Brawl, in an attempt to upset him and sneeze them out of his innards. Dumbo a reward for clearing the memory's plot. My final world on Floor 6 was Halloween Town, which begins with an immediate Heartless mob fight with Jack Skellington and immediate friend card. After which the party learns Terror as a special slight and continues on to Dr. Finkelstein's lab. Jack casts spells like in the first game, so feel free to abuse the double, triple casting of spells during this floor. This is where I highly recommend messing around with some Moogle rooms, as you'll want to update your cards for the upcoming difficulty spike once you wrap up the 6th floor. Anyways, the plot deals with the concept of true memories, something which greatly interests Sora and hopefully the audience. Discussing how memories warp with time, some growing dark and others more beautiful, the party is directed to find Sally, who took the doctor's potion that supposedly awakens true memories. Once it was sniffed, the Heartless began showing up, a foreboding omen indeed, so when they discover Sally, naturally Oogie Boogie shows up and swipes the potion. When swallowing it, it terrifies the bag of bugs so much that the resulting boss fight is a simplistic take on the first game's encounter. It deals with the Disney villain throwing dice, of which you can break to cause a gimmick card to dispel the fence separating him from the player. It's an exceedingly simple boss fight, all things considered, so finish him off and witness the contemplation on what bad things may happen if Sora reawakens his true memories. All the while, the overarching plot has been occurring between floors. Rewinding a bit back to the 2nd floor, after the party defeated Axel, Jimmy brings up the current mystery.
You may no longer be who you are.
I may no longer be me. How can I be anyone else?
Of course. Still, you can't be too careful.
Yep. Feels like just about anything could happen here in Castle Castle Oblivion. Oh, yeah. Now I remember.
We'll be okay. Whatever it is they're cooking up, we'll be able to handle it together.
Course we will. Like at that creepy castle we explored together. The one with all those weird contraptions.
When was that?
I can't remember. What was it called?
Gorge. Oh, it was, Holly? Holler? Sorry, I can't remember.
What? Stop goofing around.
Goofy, sure you didn't make it up?
I don't think so.
So despite being in another castle, one of which Goofy remembers another creepy castle from their first adventure, one nobody can seem to remember the name of, despite being one of the final worlds they visited on their previous adventure. Goofy even remembers the vital events of that world, where Sora used the Keyblade to free his and Kairi's hearts and become a Heartless temporarily.
Then he just disappeared, and I was so worried. How could I ever forget that?
Oh, it was when I turned into a Heartless. Wait, that happened in a castle?
Despite Donald remembering it taking place in a castle, nobody can remember the name of it.
Then what's it called?
That's easy, it was.
Calling upon Jiminy and his journal, he opens it up and is shocked to realize that every page is blank. Speaking for the audience, the party begins to put 2 and 2 together.
Something screwy. Journal pages don't trust Spanish.
What if it's more things?
Huh?
Goofy was telling us about another castle we'd been to, but none of us really remembers it. Do you think? Could it be that we don't remember because we're losing our memories?
Despite both optimism and worry melding together, the party continues forward, sure that everything will be alright and that they couldn't possibly forget who their friends are.
So if there's nothing here that can make you forget about your friends, then we have nothing to be scared of. Let's go!
But when I turned into a Heartless, who was the one who took forever to notice and kept clobbering me?
How come you couldn't forget about that?
As natural exposition for newcomers and returning fans alike, Donald brings up the reason why they're even at Castle Oblivion.
Why bring that up?
I had to be sure that I hadn't forgotten him.
How'd that go for you?
Good. I remembered, We want to trust to find the king.
Well, I remember that too. The king helped save everything by staying on the other side of the door to darkness, I think.
You got it, Goofy.
And me? I'm looking for Riku. He was with the king when the door closed.
Confident they can't forget the most important of memories, the scene transitions to Axel and a blonde female, watching the party through a crystal ball of sorts. Questioning why Axel's so interested in Sora, Axel says Sora was able to retain his memories and feelings as a Heartless, just like one other man. It prompts Larxene to claim that it was the strength of Sora's heart that intrigues Axel, who cryptically replies,
To unlock the mysteries of the heart. Isn't that the organization's mission?
Back to the party, they try to think if they've forgotten anything along the way up to the 4th floor, assuming if they had, they must not have been important ones.
If we did, what would it have been?
Sora brings out Kairi's good luck charm as his most powerful motivation to return back to her on Destiny Islands with Riku in hand. Remembering Kairi, Sora catches a glimpse of a girl clad in white, Donald bringing him back after being lost in thought.
Do I know? That girl?
Hey, Sora, where did you go?
Sorry, never mind.
We better keep going.
Climbing further up, Sora begins dwelling on who that other girl was, digging into his own memories in an attempt to remember her name.
Who could that have been before? In my memory.
Meanwhile, that same girl is working on a drawing depicting Sora, Kairi, herself, and Riku hand in hand. Right as they reach the 5th floor, Sora exclaims to the party that there was another girl.
I remember!
Huh?
There was another girl!
What? A girl? Where?
Rightly so, Jiminy calls him out on this, speaking for those who especially had played the first Kingdom Hearts, as this is the first time a 4th tight-knit friend was ever mentioned. She apparently also grew up on Destiny Islands with them, Sora's memory of her slowly coming back to him as they ascend the castle.
Yeah, I guess I forgot all about her.
By the 6th floor, Sora remembers that she was always quietly drawing them, and despite having some pleasant memories, she suddenly left one day, though Sora can't quite remember the reason for her departure. Once again, Jiminy comes to the rescue.
I must point out, Sora keeps remembering things instead of forgetting them. It seems to me, forgetting things may be the only way to reach the memories buried deeper down inside each of us.
So we should forget in order to remember?
Like those guys said, our most precious memories lie so deep in our hearts that they're out of reach.
This dangerous method of forgetting in order to remember begins to spur the heroes on to forget things faster, which is charming in its own way. Since Sora seems to be the only one remembering anything instead of forgetting at the same rate the Disney characters are, this is rightfully ringing alarm bells in the more perceptive of players. A whiff of Mary, surnamed Sue, wafting into the proceedings.
Come on, Goofy. Let's get going. We gotta forget things faster.
Back up top with Axel and Larxene, they confirm their plan apparently working as intended, with Larxene demanding a swing at the Keyblade wielder,
break him.
Axel warning her not to break him.
Well, do I detect a soft spot? I'm not gonna break the toy. I'm not dumb.
Don't forget, Sora is the key. We need him if we're going to take over the organization.
I know that you're in on it too. But keep it under your hood, at least until the time is right.
You would have been wise to have done the same, Larxene.
With intrigue setting in on this mysterious black-garbed group, the party continues onwards and finishes the first round of world cards, leading them into the exit hall of the 6th floor, with Larxene waiting for them. She taunts Sora at his lack of remembering that poor girl. This leads to the genre-savvy villain spelling it out for them.
You know her? Is she here?
Yes, she is. You see, the bad guys are holding her captive, somewhere deep inside the castle. And you obviously are the hero, so you have to go save her. Although...
Ah!
I'm a bad guy, so you have to go through me.
Glancing at a charm Sora doesn't seem to remember, Larxene slowly coaxes the girl's name out of him. What a witch. After angering Sora, Larxene brandishes her electrified knives and triggers a boss fight. Larxene is fast and can easily chip away at Sora's HP, but she's also generally weak that a decent amount of HP or relentless assault will be enough to successfully fight her off. After earning Thunder Magic after touring with Sora's feelings, mocking his status as a hero who couldn't remember a seemingly important friend, Larxene throws him some more world cards and disappears.
Baby. And if you're gonna be a baby, then here you go. I created another card from your memories, you know. Be a good boy and say thanks. Ta-ta.
Wait, Larxene! Where are you? Don't you dare hide from me! Show yourself!
A genuinely angry Sora swipes at the air, yelling at the blonde vixen, Donald and Goofy worried at their usually cheerful friend. Jiminy, calming down Sora so he can end his anger-fueled rodeo, sympathizes with his frustrated friend. The party left in awkward silence at the antagonist's words, cutting through Sora deeper than her knives ever could.
Naminé's memory.
At this point, the player is given the choice of 4 more previously visited worlds to select the order for floors 7 through 10. As an aside, this is where the key to rewards begins to drop, a special yellow key card that allows access to those previously locked rooms you will have spotted on the map beforehand. While it's possible to continuously play around the 7th floor to gather the card, you can only keep one on you at a time. It can turn into a game of get the card, go back to previous floors, and unlock them. And while that's certainly an option, and something I did on a previous run that I streamed, there are clear game bonuses that unlock a second round of cards that will require you to reopen each reward anyway. So the choice is up to you whether to hold off on the backtracking, or if you don't mind it. More on this later, but I felt it's worth mentioning. I chose Atlantica, so let's dive into that one first. Being inside a castle inside a memory of an ocean, the party doesn't transform into their oceanic forms like in the first game, but instead retains gravity and normal movement. So there's nothing to trip up players this time around, but to deal with a majority of Heartless that basically float to simulate being underwater. The plot deals with Ariel stealing her father's trident from Ursula to save Flounder, who she's holding hostage, and it really has nothing to do with the castle building and storyline beyond sharing Sora's urgency to save a captured friend as well. Ariel can be gotten as a friend card who deals combo damage, but is otherwise unremarkable. The boss fight with Ursula is more memorable, as you have to fight her giant form while on a circular arena, where you must first defeat her tentacles to then reach her face to deal actual damage. Ursula has some pretty high value cards, but most of her attacks are super telegraphed, so she shouldn't be too much of a hassle. Like Genie Jafar and Trickmaster, it's more about getting her to show her face so you can actually deal damage that matters. Which in my experience was one of the longer non-final boss fights in the series, as far as critical path confrontations go, mainly because it's a whole bunch of waiting. The gimmick card here very usefully dispels all of her tentacles and also stuns Ursula for free hits, so take it whenever you can to speed this process along. Neverland was my 8th floor, of which you earn Glide from the get-go once meeting Tinkerbell. She eventually meets up with Peter Pan, who retains his guest status from the first game by becoming a friend card. He acts similar to Aladdin, stabbing enemies for Moogle points, so go wild if that interests you. Plot-wise, the characters have lost so much of their memories by this point that they don't even remember the Disney worlds that they visited just weeks prior, and they often don't even remember how they even got there in the first place. Here, just showing up on a ship randomly. Peter Pan flies off in a huff between the 2nd and 3rd story beats, with Captain Hook being the requisite boss battle. He remains fast and explosive, but at this stage I was abusing slights so much that he was really a pushover. A proper deck and strategy shouldn't leave him too difficult if I'm being honest. since the plot relevance deals with how people forget things in time, with Sora reaffirming his belief that all memories, especially the most important ones, are never truly forgotten, but more like they're asleep. Using the analogy that when the right thing comes along to awaken that memory, you'll remember it as it comes up to the surface, tying in pretty nicely to the whole growing up theme that Peter Pan has innately. Following the order set by the game, Hollow Bastion was my 9th floor world, the creepy castle with crazy contraptions Goofy was trying to remember earlier, though nobody in the party even recognizes the place anymore at this state. They arrive to see the titular protagonist of Beauty and the Beast in the ending of a parting, Belle choosing to coldly brush off the Beast. Wanting to discover why, the party meets up with Belle in the library, discovering that she was kidnapped and thus not here of her own will. Before she's able to elaborate on why she was so cruel earlier, she tells our heroes to hide as Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty fame shows up, deciding to spur on the Beast's help by putting Belle in danger by kidnapping her. Drawing him out, Beast and the gang show up to Belle still insisting on driving the Beast away, much to the confusion of the protagonists. Maleficent, bearing witness to Beast's beautiful and powerful heart, attempts to capture it to fuel her own magic, with Belle jumping in front of the spell and giving up her heart anyway, revealing her true love for the Beast. This naturally has Beast joining up with Sora, Donald, and Goofy as a friend card, and eventually challenging Maleficent's dragon form again. She's still as dangerous as she was in the first game, but you have a bit more options during this battle. While her flame attacks and ground pounds are still troublesome and hard-hitting, the gimmick card here is just as OP. A floating platform will appear, allowing you to avoid virtually all of her attacks. This allows otherwise useless attacks, such as the Sonic Blade Slight, to become super viable options and quickly strike her down if you're prepared for it. Leaving the Lovebirds alone, the party will then proceed to the next floor. 10F was 100 Acre Wood for me, and it functions as the cooldown minigame world here as it did in the first game. It deals with Winnie the Pooh looking for his friends, even though he can't quite remember them. Seeing a bit of himself in Pooh's plight, Sora helps the bear in his quest to find nobody, a bit of a smile creeping into anyone who's familiar with upcoming plot points. The resulting minigames are simple, but much less janky in comparison to the implementation in Kingdom Hearts' final mix. Sora must simply find Piglet once he stops rushing in and out of bushes, rewarding him with the Confused Slight, if anyone really cares. Veggie Panic is the game held at Rabbit's house, in which you separate at least 30 cabbages and pumpkins rolling down a hill, as unsanitary as that is. You must also avoid streams of carrots that will trip up Sora, with an allowance of 6 mistakes before calling a game over. Pooh will also occasionally skid into the field when distracted by a local butterfly, which is... hey, he's the bear of your little brain, cut him some slack. Sora can trigger a strike raid to clear veggies out of the way. This one's oddly relaxing for me, and is a solidly built minigame to boot that rewards you with Cross/Plus if you're a heavy cloud user. Balloon Glider is the next minigame, a Flappy Bird-esque game of patience as you navigate Pooh around a honey tree. I know this is going to come across as a poor excuse, but as I was playing on a smaller screen to record this, I couldn't see the bees half the time. It's not usually this difficult, but I just wasn't having any of it, I guess. Call me impatient. You can gather balloons as you float upwards with a max of 3 chances, so really just stay calm and you should do much better than I did, rewarding you with the powerful Faraga Burst Light. Tigger's Jumpathon is a simple game of Simon Says. Super easy to cheese, just jot down quickly the order in which Tigger jumps the stumps and you will be golden. It's also not hard to reach the bare minimum 25 streak without resorting to underhanded methods, but again, you do you. The reward is the Spellbinder attack card, which then leads to the final 2 minigames in this incarnation of the 100 Acre Wood. It requires Sora to guide Pooh to his friends, some of which trigger minigames. The first is Whirlwood Plunge, a simple minigame of gathering honey as Pooh and Sora fall down to their doom while avoiding debris. Recruiting Rue at the end grants the Mega Ether item card, which then leads Boar and Bear to Eeyore. To help grab his tail from bees, Rumble Rumble is initiated, in which you must exterminate 50 bees that attack Pooh Bear. This initiates a preset deck, so have fun learning the spells here as it grants you the ever-important Elixir item card, which will be put to good use in the upcoming final floors in Sora's Tale. After doing any amount of minigames, you will then leave the 100 Acre Wood and complete the floor, the calm before the storm if you will. Now back to the real narrative at hand. Coming off of her touring with Sora, Larxene returns to Axel seemingly confident in her touring with the hero.
Really? It looked to me like you just plain lost.
How dare you! You don't appreciate the nuances of
An ungainly effort.
Before any excuses are had, a new face shows up, the scientist Vexen.
How could you be humbled by someone of such limited significance? You shame the organization.
How can we help you, Vexen? It's not very often we see you topside.
I came to lend you a hand.
He is given a gift from Axel as familiar-looking shoes enter the frame.
A humble gift to my elder. I hope you use it to put on a very good show for us.
Meanwhile, on the 7th floor, Sora is rushing forward, upset that Naminé was now held captive by these black coats, and is now determined to rescue her. Donald and Goofy getting increasingly worried at how angry Sora is becoming.
About that too.
Reaching the exit hall of the 7th floor, Sora meets up with Riku, shocked and at a loss for words, quite frankly.
Riku! What are you doing here?
Not happy to see me? Let me know if I'm getting in the way. You know, of something that's more important.
Huh? I didn't mean that.
Spare the excuses. I bet that you had all but forgotten about me.
Are you crazy? Come on, I came all this way looking for you.
But you're not anymore, right? Now it's only Naminé that you're looking for.
Riku.
Riku's demeanor is immediately hostile, seemingly disgruntled that Sora never cared about him or Naminé's feelings, insinuating that Naminé wants nothing to do with Sora, apparently forgetting why she had left Destiny Islands in the first place. Riku dons his Dark Hula outfit, determined to protect Naminé, even from Sora attacking him outright.
Since when have you ever cared about me? Naminé's not the only one who's sick of looking at you. So am I!
Riku, stop it!
Thus a boss battle is at hand, roughly marking the halfway point of Sora's tale. Riku's fast and able to break many of Sora's cards with high values and a few zeros, but he also can't take too much dedicated punishments from slights, so have at him while watching your health. Sora is rewarded with the arrow spell as Riku runs off ahead of Sora, leaving him confused at his friend's antagonistic behavior. When Donald and Goofy catch up with them, Jiminy suggests that Riku was acting as if Ansem was back controlling Riku like he did not too long ago. Worried for the state of the king, since both were together in the Realm of Darkness after they closed the door to darkness at the end of the first game, Jiminy suggests that Riku might have also simply forgotten about Sora in the same way they have forgotten things climbing higher and higher up Castle Oblivion. Donald and Goofy reincorporate their very first promise.
Our very first promise?
Huh?
Always smile. That was the promise we made to each other the first time we met. We promised to never forget to keep smiling.
You're right.
One floor later, Sora once again catches up with Riku, who is less than interested about returning home.
Take the hint. I told you to go home.
Not until I rescue you and Naminé.
Reminding Sora that Kairi is waiting for their return, Riku snaps that Sora was meant to protect Kairi and insists on remaining in Castle Oblivion to protect Naminé instead. While Sora brings up the rest of their friends on the islands, Riku gladly admits he's forgotten all about their fellow islanders Tidus, Waka, and Selphie. Sora comes to the abrupt realization that he also no longer remembers their faces, Riku relishing in the feeling.
I now know the one thing that is most important to me. Protecting Naminé. Nothing else matters. Not a thing.
Hey, Riku. I think I'll jog your memory.
Go ahead and try.
A rematch ensues, Riku acting far more aggressive than he was before earlier. Otherwise, he's not too different from the first match. Be relentless, keep your HP up, and Riku will go down once again. Even in his defeat, Riku's memory wasn't jogged, Sora suggesting they search for Naminé together. Riku accuses Sora of constantly attempting to worm his way into his heart. As Riku runs off, a determined Sora unwilling to let his friend go.
You won't push me away.
A dejected Naminé is visited by Axel, who chimes in with a somber comment.
You have my sympathies from the heart. But don't waste your time. We nobodies can never hope to be somebodies.
To add insult to injury, Sora, Donald, and Goofy arrive on the 9th floor to forget someone very important.
Sora, Riku, and... what was her name?
It seems our memories are fading mighty fast. Sora, we gotta hurry.
This is where most players coming off of Kingdom Hearts will be all hands on deck, as it seems Kairi is being pushed aside in favor of this new girl on the block,
We
Naminé.
three were never apart. Me and Riku and Naminé.
The cautious trio reach the exit hall of the 9th floor with no signs of Riku. A brief relief while discourse occurs further inside Castle Oblivion. Larkstein and Axel are mocking Vexen's Riku at his repeated and apparent inferiority against Sora, resulting in much anger and tension between the organization members, dropping vague comments about the lack of hearts and this apparent organization that binds these characters together beyond their black coats.
Aha! Oh, I see now. I would have never guessed that. So sorry, Vexen.
Silence!
Predictable response. Forget it. Men without hearts are so boring.
You're one to talk. As if you have such a heart to speak of yourself.
That's enough.
Before any more bickering can occur, the Lord of the Castle himself appears, revealing himself to the player by voice and his pedal motif as the one who baited Sora at the crossroads at the start of the game. Marluxia claims Vexen's project was an abject failure, and pulls out a scythe when Vexen attempts to pull his rank as number 4, though they don't go so far as to physically fight.
In this organization, you're number 11. I'm number 4, and I will not have you!
Marluxia proceeds to goad Vexen to prove himself non-treasonous, Axel catching on pretty easily on what Marluxia has orchestrated. Naminé is left to reluctantly agree with Marluxia as he brings up a certain promise made to her.
Isn't that right, Naminé?
Yes.
Back at the entrance hall of the 10th floor, Sora himself begins to recount the very same promise to protect Naminé one night amidst shooting stars, an event those familiar with the answer reports of the first game will be very aware of. Goofy, Donald, and Jiminy also sense this drastic retconning of prior events, visibly worried about their spiky-haired protagonist's single-minded determination to save a girl he hadn't even remembered before stepping foot into this castle.
On the islands, I promised Naminé that I'd keep her safe, no matter what. But I forgot it. I didn't remember until I started forgetting everything else. A promise between the two of us. That's why I can't leave. Now that I remember the promise, I have to keep it.
Of course. We understand, Sora.
The protagonists reach the stairwell before the 11th floor and come face to face with Vexen, who demands a debt.
I am Vexen. I have come to collect your debt, Sora.
A debt? Sora, do you owe something to this guy?
Come on, of course not.
Oh, but you do.
After revealing that he was responsible for reuniting Sora with his former friend, Sora lashes out at Vexen, convinced he's controlling Riku and demands answers. Vexen remains nonplussed, brandishing a shield befitting his cold demeanor, and challenges Sora to battle. He fittingly possesses high-value cards and unleashes various ice-based slights that can frequently break Sora's attacks with well-placed zero cards, but he's also easily stunned and telegraphs many of his moves. Though his attacks aren't to be underestimated, he will freeze Sora, and once it leaves him immobilized, subsequent attacks while frozen will deal heavy damage, so stay on your toes. Fire-based attacks are an obvious boon here, but so is Sonic Blade. It's my go-to for many fights now, especially due to its ability to stun opponents and prevent them from playing cards and going through their decks themselves. The game assumes you've gathered a healthy pool of CP and cards for potential decks at this point, so Vexen will eventually go down if you don't allow yourself to be broken frequently and break his own defenses, earning the Freeze Slight as a reward. After the battle concludes, Vexen reveals he was diving into Sora's memory during their battle, similar to the fight with Unknown and Hollow Bastion back in the first game, as well as Marluxia at the entrance hall of Castle Oblivion to extract the first map cards. This time, Vexen brandishes a mysterious card that does nothing to soothe an increasingly agitated Sora. Returning back to the organization members, Axel picks Marluxia's brain as to Vexen's rash actions, for Sora's defeat would mess up the organization's plans, apparently. Axel, ever direct, requests a more official order.
Haven't a clue, really. Maybe you could spell it out for me.
Vexen has clearly committed a treasonous act against the organization. You must eliminate the traitor.
No taking that back later.
The trio then step foot into their only remaining world card forward for the 11th floor, into Twilight Town, the so-called world located on the other side of Sora's heart. Lamenting their extreme loss of memory at this point, Sora pulls out Naminé's good luck charm and recalls his memory the night of the shooting stars, sans Kairi. Solemnly exploring the quiet town, the gang eventually come across a mysterious mansion tucked away in a forgotten and overgrown corner. Sora feels a strange compulsion similar to the time he recalled Hollow Bastion due to Kairi's heart inside him. He swears he's never stepped foot inside Twilight Town, yet he feels nostalgic all the same. When questioned on this curious sensation, Sora explains that while his memories of Naminé slowly came floating up to the surface in pieces, this mansion feels akin to deja vu. Vexen then appears from the darkness, toying with Sora's confusion and insinuating that his feelings of Twilight Town are more real than his memories of Naminé. Our hero adamant on not being tricked and is having none of Vexen's word games.
Your memories of Naminé or your feelings here? Which of the two of these is more real, I wonder?
Naminé, of course. Whatever it is that I'm feeling, I bet it's just another one of your mean little tricks.
If you remain bound by the chain of memories, and refuse to believe what is truly found inside your heart, then throw it away. You are not a Keyblade master, just a slave to twisted memories. Yes, exactly like my Riku. Your existence is worth nothing!
Like your Riku? Worth nothing? That's enough! You're the one who changed Riku! Every word you've said is a lie! I'd never throw away my heart! I'm gonna take you down and save Riku and Naminé!
Thus, a real battle with Vexen occurs, and he doesn't pull any punches this time around. He has high-value sleights and frequently breaks combos, so it becomes a reactionary waiting game of playing sleights of your own or simply breaking him with zeros or moves like Sonic Blade to halt his actions and deal damage yourself. Whatever strategy works for you, be mindful of being caught up in a combo you weren't survived from, and eventually the chilly academic will be on his knees. Demanding Vexen put Riku back, the scientist continues to yell at Sora's lack of awareness of the events surrounding him.
You'll lose your heart, and end up becoming Marluxia's pawn!
Marluxia? What does Naminé have to do with...
Just before answers are forthcoming, a flaming chakram whizzes past Sora, striking Vexen down in abject horror. Axel then proceeds to prove why the Maverick became such an instant fan favorite overnight.
Just nobodies who have no one to be, yet we still are. But now you can be nothing instead of just being a nobody. You're off the hook.
No! Please don't! I don't want it!
Goodbye.
What are you? What are you people?
Don't know. I wonder about that myself.
Disney-approved murder is always fun. After the cold-blooded assassination, Axel returns to an enthusiastic Larxene, who reveals Axel passed their test in their upcoming coup d'etat of the organization.
Good riddance to that blabbermouth.
Ordering Naminé to continue to layer Sora's memories in an attempt to bring his heart closer to her, Marluxia and Larxene warp away to continue with their plan in earnest, leaving Axel to witness the blonde girl's quiet anguish.
Even if you come for me, what then?
Back at the exit hall of the 11th floor, Sora meets up with Riku once again, though this time he's also reciting the same promise Sora had made to Naminé as well.
Promise, with a toy sword.
What? How do you know about that?
Because that was the promise I made to her that night. I would protect her. I said it.
Don't lie! You weren't the one there that night!
Bringing out her good luck charm as proof, Riku's mind seems to break momentarily before bringing out one of his own.
Where did you get that? Sora. Good try.
Huh?
That must be a fake. I've got the real one right here.
Before the confusion can fully set in, the two battle once more, Riku determined in his belief that Fake should be destroyed. This third battle has Riku remaining strong and fast, but also weak. Abuse his glass cannon status as you did beforehand, with hopefully more CP and HP, and you will be rewarded with a Mega Potion. Riku runs off for a third time, leaving his version of Naminé's good luck charm behind. Once Sora picks it up, it transforms into the Disney Islands map card, the trio's only way forward through the 12th floor. At this point, Donald and Goofy speak for a good chunk of the audience.
Let's just keep moving, okay? It doesn't matter.
It does matter. How can two of you have the same memory? You can't both be right.
One of the better aspects of the plot of Chain of Memories is that the characters are asking a good majority of the questions they themselves would be asking, questioning aspects of the plot when they stop making sense. Mentioning how Sora seems to have a dangerous obsession with Naminé despite not remembering her name a few floors ago, Sora angrily storms off after snapping at the classic Disney companions, removing them from Sora's friend card availability. Meanwhile, Axel, ever the wild card, releases Naminé from her prison, a move that leaves her momentarily confused. But she takes her chance, leaving Axel alone to bask in his own traitorous actions.
Just make it count. Now this should be interesting. Try and make it enjoyable, Sora. It's the least you can do for me, you know. Hey, wait. I'm enjoying this. You guys are something else.
Back on the 12th floor, Sora enters Disney Islands and forgets Tidus, Wakka, and Selphie's names momentarily before being teased about her. Just like Twilight Town before, Disney Islands isn't complicated to navigate, as everyone will experience the remaining floors in linear fashion for story purposes from this point onwards. This is where I start losing patience with the grinding, if you will, and I just start synthesizing a bunch of my saved up bounty rooms, since you can safely clear Chain of Memories in the high 30s to mid 40s if you built your deck up right, or understand the mechanics. Many won't see the level cap because it's largely unnecessary unless you like them trophies for bragging rights. Eventually running across a Riku from his memories who isn't out to get him at every chance he gets, a storm begins brewing similar to how Sora's journey began, Riku assuming Sora will once again protect her. Eventually, Sora runs into a familiar scene for those coming off of the first game. The island is being torn apart, and a Darkseid appears to challenge Sora. Been a while since facing a Heartless boss, huh? Darkseid isn't too difficult since you can just wait him out, avoiding damage and leaving his hands and head wide open to various counterattacks. Since shadows shouldn't be any concern at this point in the game. A gimmick card is available once again, offering the chance to raise up some pillars of sand to easily reach Darkseid's face. More of a formality than any real challenging fight compared to Riku and Vexen beforehand, the large Heartless will eventually fall and Sora will have a chance to catch up with Naminé for some long-awaited answers. Despite her happiness, Naminé admits this entire ordeal is her fault. Blaming loneliness, she explains to Sora that she's not really here, feeling remorse at what she's done to his heart. Claiming she's not in anyone's heart, Sora optimistically brings out her good luck charm as proof she has to be, Naminé bringing her brand of existential crisis to Sora's good nature.
No, Sora! You can't believe me!
What am I supposed to do?
Think, Sora. Think just one more time. About who's most special to you.
Naminé suggests one memory that will begin to clear up his fog of confusion.
That's an easy one. It's you, Naminé.
Sora emerges alone into the exit hall of the 12th floor, greeting the real Naminé, confirming to him what the audience already knows.
It's not you, right?
Before Sora is able to get answers, Riku appears once again and elaborates on Sora's messed up state of being. They face off for the fourth and final time, so have at it during this crucial moment. Emerging from the fight with a trigger prompt, gamers speak for, if you need to save or heal up, you better do so now. Riku will punish Sora and attempt to eliminate him once and for all. Naminé then essentially breaks Riku, much to Sora's horror.
I said stop!
Riku? Riku? Riku!
To make matters worse, Larxene then comes in to put all cards on the table.
Smashed his heart. Then what's gonna happen to Riku?
Oh, you're so much fun to watch. If it's Riku you're worried about, then don't. Because Riku was never really here.
The hints about Vexen's toy were right on the money. The Riku that's been picking fights with Sora was an artificial being this entire time. This so-called Riku replica was also implanted with memories that were never his to begin with, which is what Naminé's powers are all about. Being called a witch with the power to control people's memories, Larxene expresses her joy at how much they were toying with Sora's memories. Angry at Axel for allowing Naminé to escape and ruin their plan, Larxene bitch-slaps Naminé away and is about to attack a dejected Sora, still clinging on to his fabricated promise, much to the disgust of Larxene.
There is no promise, and there never was. You're just delusional. Must you insist on playing the hero? Whatever. If that's the way you want it, you're going down alone!
Donald and Goofy show up for a big damn hero moment, fully prepared to take on a now serious Larxene, charged up at her chance at masochistic pleasure.
Have it your way. More pain for you means more fun for me!
Larxene is way more savage than she was 6 floors ago. Her lightning is much more powerful and far-reaching, requiring quick reflexes and or stunning attacks to stave off her own. As long as you're as relentless as she is, Larxene will eventually fall, in denial at her complete and total loss. Another organization member down.
I'm fainting? No, this isn't the way I won't allow.
Despite Donald and Goofy happy for Sora at finding Naminé, Jiminy speaks for the audience on the numerous questions that they were duped by. Naminé proceeds to explain that she never existed in Sora's true memories, causing their lost memories and Sora's jumbled mess of a mind. Learning that Marluxia is the one responsible for controlling Naminé and forcing her to cooperate, Sora proves that he's a really forgiving 14-year-old, even if he did finally show off manufactured anger befitting a teenager.
Until I get my memories back, smile and try to be happy. It's easier on me that way.
Sora.
Oh, brother, that's a bit much.
It's okay. Sora always gets like this every time he's around a girl.
Aw, cut it out. I thought you both lost your memories too.
Too bad. Good friends don't forget the good stuff.
Come on.
Leaving Naminé to look after the Riku replica, anyone with any storytelling instinct at all knows this isn't going to last for long. The three musketeers head to the 13th and uppermost floor of Castle Oblivion itself. The trio affirm their bond in a friendship is power moment the series is infamous for, learning the Trinity limit as a fitting reward.
Or even if we sort of forget each other.
Whatever happens, we're friends.
I'll for one and one for all.
Castle Oblivion itself is a large floor with linear paths to story beats with the toughest Heartless in the game, so any strategy to quickly and efficiently eliminate Heartless is welcome here. Or you can simply do what I did and spam Bounty and Moogle rooms to avoid the hassle and ignore previous gem-filled experience points. Your call. Along the way, cinematics will occur periodically as Sora makes his way towards the marked story room. As expected, Naminé is snuck up on by a black-coated figure to no doubt be put to proper use soon. As Sora approaches the Key to Beginnings, Axel appears to confront Marluxia himself, accusations of traitor being thrown around between the two. While the pink-haired lord is visibly frustrated at Axel's betrayal, the red-headed schemer reveals he was sent to Castle Oblivion to do as ordered.
Remember the order. You must eliminate the traitor. I always follow orders, Marluxia.
After a brief chakram on Scythe's scuffle, Marluxia brings out Naminé as a shield. While it's ineffective against Axel, it works well enough for Sora to step in and confront Axel, allowing Marluxia to get away for the time being.
Now, Sora, we've got more in common than you might think. I'd really rather not fight you. But I can't dishonor the organization, now can I?
This time around, Axel similarly doesn't hold back, so the usual advice applies here. Beware card breaks, keep high-level slights or zeros around to break yourself, keep your HP up, and situational awareness sharp. Axel's fire will eventually burn out, Sora emerging victorious in his win.
What do you mean?
Sorry, I would hate to kill the suspense.
The entertaining double/triple agent fades away, leaving Sora to take down the last known organization member and rescue Naminé once and for all. Once confronted, Marluxia demands that Naminé destroys Sora's heart, the hero recklessly willing to lose all of his memories in his soul-warped desire to protect the girl he doesn't actually know. While Donald and Goofy intend on remembering for Sora, Marluxia elaborates that anyone without memories will turn into a lifeless shell, mocking Repliku as he does. Speaking of which...
Take another guess.
What?
It can't be.
Riku!
No. Just an imitation.
There's that word again, shell.
You're a
Similar
shell.
to the Ansem reports and Battle Against
Shell
Unknown.
who has had everything taken. Everything!
Fed up with all the heroes willing to throw away their individuality in their attempts to remain heroic, Marluxia faces Sora scythe in hand.
You would knowingly shackle your heart with a chain of memories born of lies? You would be one who has a heart, yet cast aside your heart's freedom? You turn from the truth because your heart is weak. You will never defeat me!
Kicking off with more Shimamura musical mastery, Marluxia fluctuates from being slow and reactionary to quick on the draw with sleights. It's wise to keep up sleights of your own, or at least high-valued stocked combos, to whittle away at his large HP pool. If you've made it this far without having too much trouble against the previous 3 organization members, then Marluxia shouldn't prove too difficult for you.
So you are a hero.
Vanishing and relinquishing his enemy card, Marluxia taunts the Keyblade wielder as having defeated an illusion, angering Repliku.
Another imitation.
He's really... in there?
Sensing Marluxia's power through the large door ahead of them, Sora tasks Repliku to look after Naminé. This act of trust awakening the parts of the real Riku the replica is based on.
You don't mind?
Should I?
This is the point of no return, as the new save point and warning when approaching the door is clearly telegraphed, so gear up and head towards their final battle.
Soon the emptiness will shatter your heart. Here in this world of nothingness. as lightless oblivion devours you. Drown in the ever-blooming darkness!
Once inside, Marluxia appears atop a scythed creature clad in white, the Grim Reaper theme ever more clear in case you didn't quite catch it beforehand. All pretenses of an active deck are dropped here, as Marluxia's second form floats above, requiring Sora to focus on breaking its 2 scythe arms first before attacking the body proper. Once broken, Marluxia will begin to initiate more ranged attacks alongside powerful singular valued attacks, easily broken if you have a high enough stock, plentiful zeros, or corresponding slights. A deck full of zeros, 8s, and 9s should have no problem with this phase, which was the original final boss of the Game Boy Advance title. However, once defeated here, Rechain of Memories reveals a new third form where the true final battle takes place. Riding atop an even more massive white creature in a specialized void, Marluxia has bonded himself yet again to this creature, a massive Reaper complete with a fuchsia skull ready to deal out assistance and slights, which Marluxia can rapid-fire activate on a whim. While he remains stationary, his penchant for constantly throwing out slights until one triggers is the real danger here, as he triggers another menu-driven quirk similar to Unknown's roulette of the command wheel in the first game. If left to unleash Whirlwind to the Void, Marluxia and his familiar will summon a gust of wind that causes Sora to drop all of his cards, most important of which is the reload card, so you have a few seconds to gather up your deck while still breaking his relentless attacks. If you can stock above 20, you will consistently block Marluxia's attacks, though he can trigger the attack Doom, which is of particular importance here. It initiates a duel of which you have 6 seconds to break out of or face instant death. Otherwise, high-powered cards and staying sharp will win the day, defeating the 4th and final organization member that stood in Sora's way.
This is the heart of a hero.
Outside, Replicute decides to go his own way, as Naminé brings up an ultimatum for Sora, Jiminy, Donald, and Goofy. While she can't unlink the memories that she undid, similar to a chain of memories, title drop, that means the heroes must forget everything that transpired in Castle Oblivion in order to do so. The organization, Naminé, everything. Sora ultimately makes the decision that ends the game.
You can lose your memories of this castle and reclaim your old ones. Or keep your memories here and give up the memories that you've lost.
Do I have to choose?
Yes.
Make me like I was.
Oh, okay. Nobody needs to keep a bunch of memories that aren't real, right? You want to remember all of the people who are really important to you. Anybody would choose that.
Leading them to an egg-shaped memory pod, Naminé explains that this will both protect them and restore their memories through sleep, though it may take some time. To ensure they remember who to thank, Jiminy decides to jot down her name in his journal, as they will all enter the pods to restore their real memories.
That makes me feel better.
Despite Naminé's willingness to say goodbye, Sora insists that once he wakes, they will then be able to start over, able to become true friends without any lies binding them together. They make a pinky promise to meet up again, Sora picking up that the memory of this real promise will remain with him if you never truly lose your memories, no matter how deep they sleep within. As the pod closes, Naminé suggests he remembers a promise he made just weeks before. While she was able to change her good luck charm, just one particular memory changed it back to the Thalassa Shell Wayfinder that it originally was. Thinking back on the friends he's made, Sora eventually remembers his red-headed sweetheart. Unlocking the first step to remembering all of his friends, Naminé begins to fade, optimistic about their new promise, and believe that the light will bring them together again. The credits roll, and that's the main game.
You might forget about
Simple and clean plays amidst models of the good guys, while the eagle-eyed viewers may spot credits for characters that haven't appeared. Towards the end, clips showcase the secondary Destiny Island trio playing on the main island, Selphie witnessing Kairi staring longingly at their island playground. Walking alone down an empty hallway in Castle Oblivion, Repliku is seemingly greeted by Axel, who reaches out his hand in unknown assistance. Meanwhile, back in Twilight Town, a blonde-haired kid walks along clad in black and white, his face cut off before he can turn around properly. A special cinematic plays afterwards, showcasing a white room full of 13 tall thrones full of members in black cloaks, presumably the organization alluded to in the game. 7 seats left empty. Intrigue is left lingering as Naminé watches over Sora's slumber as poetic texts allude to meeting once again. And that wraps up Sora's tale.
But with our promise, I can come back.
A promise is a promise.
Yes. One day the light, it will be ours and it will bring us together. Till then, I'll be in your heart.
Right. Forgotten, but not lost.
This is where the normal ending of the review would be if Chain of Memories isn't known to have 2 scenarios, and since Riku shares the cover with Sora and the internet being a thing, it doesn't take long to figure out that once Sora's tale is completed, Riku's opens up once returning to the main menu, teasing behind-the-scenes events. Naturally, this was a nice surprise to me back in 2005 when I first played the game. Maybe it was 2006? It was before Kingdom Hearts 2 released, and Chain of Memories was the first Kingdom Hearts game I had completed fully before finally getting my own PS2 as a birthday present back in 2008. So having more content on a game I enjoyed was a nice bonus, even if I didn't have all the context going into it. For now, I'll summarize a bit of this main chunk of the title before moving on to Riku's side of the game. As far as Sora's story is concerned, which is the bulk of this game, I came out thinking it was fine. Talking to friends, and especially once I went online and learned what the consensus of the game was among the fanbase, I learned it was seen, unsurprisingly I suppose, as the then black sheep of the series, being that spin-off handheld game with the cards that many chose to ignore or simply not pick up. That's semi-understandable. The main 2 entries were on PS2, and this game that bridged them was only on the Game Boy Advance. This was only the beginning of the insane spread of platforms that the series would jump onto and create a headache for fans. But back then it was really simple. As someone who got the game for a friend, I was able to eventually borrow it later from another friend and came across impressed at a very polished GBA game. The criticisms on the handheld were mostly due to its lack of buttons and being tied to a small screen. The minimalistic HUD wasn't a deal breaker for me, but the 2 face buttons and small shoulder buttons left a lot of actions to be doubled up upon. And changing to a 2D plane with limited depth was certainly a change of pace that doesn't exactly line up with the 3D original. It wasn't terrible, however. The sprite work in the game remains really detailed, fluid, and very impressive even to this day, making it one of 2004's best handheld games from a gameplay and presentation standpoint. Though it isn't for everyone. I certainly didn't enjoy the cramps I had to endure during the more intense battles, but it was an admirable attempt at tweaking the Kingdom Hearts gameplay onto the small screen. And portability does have its merits. Most of these issues are rectified here in Chain of Memories. There's a bunch of copy-pasting going on by virtue of the dungeon crawler aspects to the design, but the combat system itself is pretty solid at its core. With expanded real estate, especially on a widescreen HD presentation the HD Remix collections offer, a bunch of added information can be displayed at once, from the minutiae of how many cards remain in your deck, to the range of movement a 3D arena allows, to the expanded buttons a full controller brings you, greatly lessening any errors in input the GBA version could sometimes trigger. While half of the cutscenes aren't voiced, the ones that are certainly were given their usual amount of attention, since I'm never too disappointed with the performances in this series. This one's up to debate since I know some of the delivery can feel off in this game, but that's due to how they had to dub this one. Usually, in the main games when these are localized, any important enough cutscene will be lip-synced to English when not utilizing the infamous fish face. Which, to be fair, is even more noticeable in the HD versions here. However, the cutscenes employed in Recom here were done obviously with the Japanese voice actors in mind first, something that's occasionally apparent in the localized versions when certain sentences are awkwardly lingered upon, or when there's more than a few, noticeable seconds, of dead air between a conversation. The series gets better at this going forward, but the game is one of the exceptions. Since this was originally a PS2 game, the cutscenes were done in Japanese, animated as such, and then were saved as video files to be played outside of the active game engine. Because of this, while they were greatly cleaned up for the HD remix collections, their quality is noticeably fuzzy at times, and some of the older assets are visible where they don't quite match the updated HD models the remixes used to keep greater continuity. This is evident with expressive characters like Vexen, where his long, drawn-out way of speaking in Japanese is easier to spot where he doesn't match his English voice actor. This is a classic dubbing job, where the English actors had to match lip flaps and deliveries to a performance that isn't their own. And it's commendable that it works as well as it does. Certain cutscenes suffer from the sort of start and stop of some of these lip flaps, but overall the translation carries over in the localization. Something I'm sure flies over many a player's head, but I notice. Animators and localizers? I notice because I'm obsessive like that. Otherwise, I believe the story presented here is fairly tight-knit and well-written as far as JRPGs go, which is weird when you think about how many don't expect JRPGs to be well-written at all. This comes down largely to localization and how strict they have to be sometimes, not to mention the guidelines and source material some of these things have. Kingdom Hearts is no exception. This is a series about a JRPG protagonist traveling with Disney characters, who here are visiting memories of previous worlds, while dealing with JRPG villains with specific looks, colorful hairstyles, and a sense of the melodramatic moments punctuated by the occasional Disney-sanctioned death. This isn't easy to take seriously on paper if you aren't into this franchise's specific brand of madness. So what Chain of Memories does is take a step back. While the first Kingdom Hearts was a charming and simple tale of a boy traveling with Donald Duck and Goofy in search of his friends and King Mickey, while defeating personified darkness with a key-shaped sword, while meeting Disney and Final Fantasy characters, amidst talk of doors and hearts and light versus darkness, it had an air of optimism about it that carried forward for many players. It's that crazy combination of charm and melodrama that clicked with a ton of gamers, that made Kingdom Hearts the juggernaut it is today. This is arguable when taken historically, but in the context of 2004, Kingdom Hearts 2 was very highly anticipated. I remember that hype. I had seen the commercials, heard the theme song, read about it beforehand in a few Disney magazines, and had a cousin who did play it pretty much from day one. Thus, a GBA game to tide fans over wasn't nothing, as I knew a lot of classmates who eagerly got it for Christmas and had played it wanting to know more about the sequel that would soon arrive in early 2006. So here, instead of being a grandiose spectacle of cameos and particle effects amid saving the world from ever-growing darkness hordes, Chain of Memories takes a tighter approach to its story. It decides to focus on its main cast of characters, in this case Sora, Donald, and Goofy, while even giving Jiminy Cricket, the glorified chronicle of collectibles, records, stats, and bestiary, a significant amount of screen time instead of simply being forgotten until convenient. By focusing on one new location and utilizing the previous game in both a narrative and gameplay sense, Chain of Memories allows fans to relive their own memories of the previous game, while still building a meta-narrative that still pushes the series forward, as the main events of the game aren't nothing, even if they are forgotten by the main characters here by the end of Sora's story. It allows Sora to be a 14-year-old kid, just talking between gameplay floors with Donald and Goofy as they enter a crazy castle amidst a mystery. And that mystery is something I really enjoy in stories like this. It plays off the theme of memory, and whether you are a fan coming off of Kingdom Hearts, or a newcomer like I was and jumped straight into this game, it does a good job of setting up both a new mystery that plays with your expectations, and even with bad writing. Sora actually gets upset in this game, enough that he snaps at Donald and Goofy, an act I know didn't sit well with quite a few fans, and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. While Sora is generally the happy-go-lucky protagonist, which is part of his inherent charm, this game showed that, when pushed to his limit, he can genuinely get upset, enough that he was out for blood for the final third of this game. Which brings me to the core of that anger, Naminé. Naminé as a character is arguably one of the best uses of a Mary Sue archetype I've bore witness to. To those who aren't aware, a Mary Sue in common vernacular is a character that is idealized to the point of being a nigh-perfect being. This is often seen in fanfiction or as a self-insert character. Well, fans will write in a new character to join established ones that they like, and tend to fit in with very little resistance or issues. Whatever flaws they may have are typically the Hollywood type of flaws, ones that seem like they make a character well-rounded, but in all actuality doesn't really hinder the character in any significant way, or lead them to face any meaningful hardship. Naminé can very well be seen as such early on, especially to those coming off of the first game's narrative. Not only was she never mentioned before in the first game, where it was established that even though Kairi wasn't born on Destiny Islands, she showed up 9 years ago that night of a meteor shower and was part of the Destiny trio of Sora, Riku, and Kairi ever since, alongside the B team of Tidus, Wakka, and Selphie. If Naminé were as vital as she was being made out to be by the narrative during the first half of the game, Sora would have likely mentioned her beforehand, as it otherwise stinks of retconning, a topic I will address in the Kingdom Hearts 2 video, so don't worry about that. So as the trio climb higher into Castle Oblivion, it's up to the player if this suddenly new but oh so important character is something that you buy. To anyone who knows Kingdom Hearts, she seemed to be that fourth wheel, in the established trio, so some warning flags may have risen the moment Sora seems to remember her out of nowhere. Given the theme of memory and remembering by forgetting, this may seem semi-plausible to a newer player like myself, who was only aware of the first game's events by the small synopsis given in Jiminy's journal, and the remixing of stories that the Memory Worlds gave us. My first go-around, it didn't seem as out of place as other sequels that begin to introduce elements not seen in their first installment of a property. Kind of that first installment weirdness. But the game does give enough of a context that made me realize this was screwy. Not only were we told that Kairi was the girl that Sora had saved and had promised to return to, when Naminé was brought into the picture, she was suddenly pushing Kairi out of his memory and the story, so there's enough hints as to the mystery develops to signal that something's very wrong. So while Naminé comes across as a Mary Sue initially, which is typically seen as a big writing no-no, I absolutely love her usage here, as I'm not sure if she was meant to deconstruct Sues in general, but she was the first example of a Mary Sue I could think of when I discovered what the term meant, or at least a self-insert. She's pretty, is blonde, wears white, thus is implied to be pure and angelic, and she draws. Hey, I draw, I connect to her, I thought. Which is also what allows her to tamper with the party's memories. When the game pulls back the curtain on her powers later on, and that she actually was inserting herself into Sora's memory under orders from the villains, that's likely where Chain of Memories cemented itself as a story I wouldn't soon forget. And for me, a pretty good introduction to the series. Add to that the characters actually taking the time between floors to discuss the plot developments, and seamlessly blending in character moments and callbacks that both develop characters and push the plot along, while bringing up questions about the lore and mysteries with very little fluff, I consider Chain of Memories a better presented and written story than the first game. Despite liking the first game more overall, if I can tip my hand this early before the actual end of this retrospective. Not to mention how the story informs why Sora and company resets to level 1 after he became a heartless slaying machine in the first game. His memory was wiped when entering the castle, and at the end he has to forget its existence and his actions within it. A jumbled mess of memories, the excuse to start Kingdom Hearts 2 at level 1. It's such a minor thing, and I know some people probably don't care about this, but I do find it admirable that they at least try to explain it in this series. Moving on, I enjoyed how the game builds upon hints in the secret ending of Kingdom Hearts, and tied more strongly by the unknown superboss in the final mix version, as well as the extended deep dive of the secret ending. The appearance of the organization hints at the darker tone the series decided to travel down. While never quite leaving the optimism of the Disney side behind, the existential melodrama the organization brings with it has permeated the series and elevated for many fans, myself included I'll admit. While nothing's too grimdark, there's enough moments of ooh, Disney allowed this to happen, that still reminds me that Disney isn't all bad, not when they give control to someone else. They had a child impale himself with a sharp sword to free his own heart and another's in the first game, while here Axel straight up immolates Vexen in front of Sora, something that admittedly had teenage me impressed when I was first playing a Disney branded game, and thinking, huh, that was murder. It's nothing too out of the ordinary, as Disney deaths are a thing, and some of those are way more intense, but it was signs that the Final Fantasy aspect of this crossover was being utilized just enough to keep the story interesting in an otherwise straightforward light versus darkness storyline. The organization bridges that middle ground between them, and I do believe it's a large part of why the series' storyline and lore remains as popular as it is today as we head into Kingdom Hearts 3. While I find the story delightful, as a fan of mysteries myself, the game's narrative is somewhat hindered by the memory worlds being accurately seen as filler to the main story being presented here. And that's a valid criticism. Luckily, there is a theater mode for those returning who simply want a refresher on the story without going through the hours needed to replay the game, but that doesn't affect a first-time playthrough. It's a bunch of heavy gameplay that's then bookmarked by the story you're actually here for, since it does bridge Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts 2 quite nicely. The organization remains as mysterious as far as their motivations and identities go by the end, yes, but there's just enough hints in the game itself and in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix especially in that game's final 3 answer reports, that sharp players can start piecing a few things together given a few more hints. A few things about completing the game. From here on out, the series keeps clear save data files that tend to unlock post-game content. In this case, there's 2 scenarios that must be beaten, as well as an extra third requirement that unlocks even more features. Once Riku's side is completed, the remix collections feature bonuses once you watch the Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2 movie. More on this later. Unlocking extra enemy cards and Keyblades as rewards. This is why I tell players to hold off on trying to 100% the game your first time around, as you could potentially have to backtrack 3 times to fully complete your card collection. The enemy cards are technically spoilers, so if you're wondering why I'm being terribly vague here, that's why. The Keyblades are sort of neat, but the enemy cards more straight up spoil the remaining organization members that Sora hasn't been introduced to in the story at this point, so mum's the word on that as far as this review is concerned. Otherwise, the game only rewards you with a gold and platinum card and bounties, as proof you went through the effort of doing everything after you gather every card. The gold card fittingly allows premium cards to be obtained again for 5 reloads, while the platinum card renders Sora invincible for 20 attacks. Kinda neat rewards just to say I did it. Speaking of which, that's where Riku's side of the story kicks in. While Sora's story is where over 2/3 of a player's gameplay will lie in this game, the second storyline is vital for elaborating on lingering behind-the-scenes questions, as well as bringing heavier connections that will lead directly into Kingdom Hearts 2. So let's dive into this part of the game. Riku's side of the story is rebranded on the title screen as Reverse Rebirth, which is a homophone in Japanese that happens to sound cool to non-English speakers, and even few natives who enjoy Japanese's adorable obsession with cool-sounding English. Once selected, the game immediately cuts to Riku floating in a void of grey emptiness. Awakened by an ominous-sounding voice suggesting he remain asleep, Riku worries about the king's location, as they were both together at the end of the first game before he woke up to this nothingness. When given the choice to remain asleep and safe, or waking up and willing to step towards the painful truth, Riku makes the proper choice.
What's this?
It is a door to the truth. Take it and your sleep ends as you take the first step toward the truth. But know this, the truth will bring you pain. Will you still go? There is no return to the security of sleep.
This seemed like a boring place to take a nap anyway.
That was very well said, Riku.
In a flash of light, Riku finds himself in Castle Oblivion, though on the bottommost basement. The game proceeds without much tutorializing, since it assumes you have indeed played through Sora's story. In fact, Riku's gameplay is just different enough to constitute a challenge and reward players who stuck with it this far, so more on that soon. Basement 12 revealed itself to be Hollow Bastion, the aforementioned creepy castle that many of the first game's third act's events took place in. The voice fills Riku in on how Castle Oblivion works, with cards representing much of how the castle works, and how this is based on Riku's memory of Hollow Bastion. The voice ends with saying that ordinarily Riku would meet people from his memories, but remains silent on the details. While exploring the castle within a castle, Riku encounters only Heartless and none of the people he met during the first game. He runs across his own room, empty and lonely, Riku ashamed and angry at the comforts he gained while pushing everything else away, including his friends. Demanding to know why he cannot meet anyone else, the voice responds that Riku casts aside everyone and everything in an attempt to pursue the power of darkness. While Riku claims that he cast aside even the darkness, the voice retorts that this emptiness is the very outcome of casting aside everything. His heart only knows how to cast aside, and all that remains is the darkness left in its wake. Riku eventually runs across Maleficent, a double made up of his memory. Since he had seeped himself deep in darkness, he can only run across and meet those in that very darkness. Angered at her words, Riku vows to destroy all beings of darkness, ashamed and angry at his own weakness, reminding Riku to destroy himself once he's finished, since he is now a being of that very same darkness. Maleficent then challenges Riku to battle in a manner similar to that in Sora's story. Overcoming the Dark Fairy, Riku reaches the exit hall of 12B as the voice returns, revealing himself to be Ansem, Seeker of Darkness.
You are
the antagonist of the first game. Representing the lingering darkness Riku gave himself up to, Ansem intends to take over the youth's body once again. Offering Riku more darkness, the king shows up as a ball of light to protect him. Ansem then challenges Riku to battle, though in reality this is more of a tutorial, of which I'll return to soon. After the game explains newer mechanics for Riku's playthrough, Ansem gives Riku more world cards, positive that Riku will submit to darkness eventually. He then stokes the darkness within Riku as a gift, confident that Ansem will win out at the end.
What'd you do?
I simply tempered the darkness that yet remains in your heart.
You still think that I'd rely on darkness?
To use it or not is your choice. I'll be waiting, Riku, for you to sense it and yield to the darkness in your heart.
What follows is an abridged take on Sora's gameplay loop, with a selection of Traverse Town, Agrabah, Monstro, and Neverland to select on basements 11 through 8. So now's the best time to dive into the gameplay differences between Riku and Sora. Since the game assumes you've played through Sora's side of the story, the gameplay is modified slightly to better fit the narrative and the change in protagonist. In my headcanon, Riku's alterations represent his status as the older friend who's more mature and battle-ready, but gameplay-wise, it functions as a nice bonus for players who are willing to put up with the game for another few hours. The most immediate difference is that you cannot customize Riku's decks, as they change automatically for each situation and floor and are limited to Riku's own weapon, Soul Eater. So you save a ton of time not editing your own deck, with the onus on the player to work with whatever the game provides you, which is a nice twist. As a result, the map cards available to Riku have also been streamlined, mainly the elimination of many of the bounty cards since there'd be no purpose. While in battle, Riku comes with his signature roll kick move, starts with high jump, and is generally faster than Sora in attack combos, which are different from Sora's. His reload is instant as well, so you can essentially focus on attacking. As far as level ups go, Riku's bonuses are also altered. While the HP bonus naturally remains across both characters, CP and slides are replaced with attack and darkness boosts. AP naturally raises Riku's raw strength, my go-to bonus, and DP affects an exclusive mechanic to Riku. What I affectionately call Dark Hula mode is officially known as Dark Mode, granting Riku all those darkness-enhanced abilities that's been used against Sora multiple times now, this time at the player's disposal. To access the boons, the Dark Gauge must be filled up to 30. Points are gained by breaking cards, giving even more reason to be quick on the trigger, as Riku can quick attack if you're fast enough. Dark Mode lasts as long as your DP remains, and it drops with damage taken and the difference between points if Riku's cards are broken in turn, eventually reverting back to his normal form until triggered again. While in Dark Mode, Riku has access to specific slights, Dark Break, Dark Firaga, and Dark Aura, with their own requirements. This is the mash triangle to win strategy I utilized in Sora's story, so I was right at home here. Couple these moves with an ever-increasing attack power and Riku is a whirlwind of death. And since the king allies himself with Riku by the 11th basement onwards, Riku's sole friend card is Mickey Mouse himself, which is kinda neat. MM Miracle stuns foes, heals Riku, and reloads his deck all at once, and can also be used in a friend slide depending on whether or not you have Dark Mode activated. Holy Burst is available for default Riku, while Inverse Burst is the Dark Mode variant, both giving Riku and Mickey firing off blasts back to back in a tornado with limited player control, while Inverse Burst also confuses enemies that are hit. The king is extremely important as a friend card, since he's one of the few ways that Riku can heal, especially in battle, where you only have Mickey to rely on if you don't utilize 2 specific enemy cards, which are also given to you automatically based on your progress. Interactable items on the field will solely drop HP orbs between battles, but in combat, Riku must take care on topping off his HP. Do you attack with the king back to back, or do you stock more of him to heal more? It really pushes that all-or-nothing Riku as the character likes to exemplify at this stage in his character arc, struggling betraying his affinity for the darkness while wanting to return to the light. There are also 5 extra slights triggered by the duel mechanic. As Riku, if you play the same value card as an enemy and have a certain number of cards depending on your opponent, you can initiate a card duel. This is similar to countering Marluxia's Doom Slight in his 3rd form. Riku must break 3, 5, or 7 cards, and if successful, can unleash one of 3 powerful dual slights, each of which has a Dark Mode variant. Impulse, Maelstrom, and Barrage are usually worth triggering if the player is ready for it. But if you can't break the cards presented to you, all dependent on the cards currently in Riku's deck, you will be stunned and open to attack, so good risk-reward system here. That's essentially the differences between playing as Riku over Sora. You're given a more streamlined gameplay loop focusing on pure attack power at the expense of customization and combat options, focusing largely on speed and sleights to maximize dark mode and mowing down enemies. I choose to think of Riku as a power trip for those who enjoyed Sora's story, and wants a quicker alternate take on events behind and underneath the scenes of the events above ground. And with that, let's get back to the story. As most of Riku's gameplay consists of traveling the basements to reach the same bosses throughout the same worlds, excluding 100 Acre Wood. Alright, instead of being warped around to a conqueror's respite like Sora, Riku must make his way back to the exit on his own after defeating the floor's boss. So some floors will potentially take just as long to reach the exit of as it did to reach the boss. Nothing major, but it is a difference. Back to the plot. We left off with Ansem reawakening dark mode within Riku, with the king showing up as a spirit to protect and support him. Riku accepting Ansem's offer to explore the card worlds and either defeat all the enemies personifying the residual darkness within him and conquering the darkness he now loathes, or to succumb to his own darkness and become Ansem's puppet once more.
I knew you'd be the one to most appropriately serve me. And now, surrender to me again.
You're crazy! Not a chance!
As he ascends to the 11th floor basement, the scene transitions to two previously unseen members of the organization in a dark corner of Castle Oblivion, Zexion and Lexaeus. Vexen appears before the pair demanding to know about the most recent disturbance. Zexion laments the lack of cordiality the other two show him, claiming the organization used to be the binding factor between the three. When Vexen tries to pull his rank as number 4 over Zexion's number 6, Lexaeus commands the scientist to drop it, leaving Zexion to elaborate on what he's detected. Not only did they receive visitors in the castle's lowest basement, described as Sense, one being a convincing double of Maleficent, to whom the organization is aware was struck down by Sora, as she now apparently is trapped in the realm of darkness. The other, Riku, is claimed to have a scent similar to that of their superior. Intrigued, the trio choose to wait it out and see what develops, since they don't know it's Riku yet.
Don't be absurd. The witch is gone.
Returning to the new protagonist, who is shocked at how he now reeks of darkness, apparently a strong scent according to him and Zexion, a projection of the king shows up to encourage Riku. Despite being an illusion, Mickey assures a somber Riku that while they cannot physically shake hands now, they did so in their hearts, back at the door to darkness at the end of the first game, meaning Riku has the honor of being connected directly to Mickey Mouse, something he definitely has over Sora. Go Riku. Zexion soon identifies the scent as Riku, Vexen hypothesizing that Riku's dark power helped him escape from the realm of darkness, appearing in Castle Oblivion thanks to Sora's earlier arrival. And since his own essence doubles in the darkness, he hypothesized that's the reason why Zexion mistook him for their superior. With Marluxia already utilizing Naminé's unique powers to supplement Sora's memories and try to make him more their puppet, Vexen decides to greet Riku on the 10th floor basement. Accusing Vexen of being in league with Ansem, Vexen once again plays word games with Riku, as he did Sora.
Let us say that he is not the Ansem with which you are familiar. He is Ansem, and he is not Ansem. Perhaps a nobody best conveys the idea.
Riddles were never my thing. Try again.
He belongs to neither the light nor the dark, but walks the twilight between. Oh. Catching on now?
Insinuating that both he and Riku are beings between light and darkness, Vexen accepts Riku's challenge, the resulting boss fight similar to Sora's first encounter.
I find coursing through you there is a darkness of formidable power growing, well worth the trouble of aggravating you.
Proving the fight a farce, Vexen used the battle to similarly capture data on Riku's particular brand of darkness. He vanishes, thanking Riku as he leaves to complete his Riku replica. Zexion and Lexaeus lament the neophyte's actions above ground. Apparently, Vexen, Lexaeus, and Zexion are founding members of this mysterious organization, while Axel, Marluxia, and Larxene are newer members, elaborating a bit on the schism between Vexen and the other members above during Sora's story. Sensing something is amiss, Zexion decides to let Vexen deal with matters as they remain below watching events unfold.
Axel. Who knows what that one is thinking?
Vexen should take care of this. His replica is soon to be completed.
But Vexen despises Marluxia. Think of the mess it would make.
So we must tell him. Isn't it better that Vexen clean up the mess than leave it to us?
Huh? What are you supposed to be? Surprised? I guess you should be. After all, I look just like you. I'll tell you what I am. I'm an exact replica of you that Vexen made from your data. So you're a fake me. Not a fake! I don't care if you're real.
As Riku makes his way
You're
towards
not
the upper
better.
half of the basement levels, he encounters
We share the
Repliku,
same
accusing
body and
Riku
the
of being
same
afraid of the dark. Despite winning their brief battle with the fake, Riku is unable to fully finish off Repliku thanks to his reluctance to fully embrace his inner darkness. Claiming the real thing is a coward, Repliku returns to Vexen, claiming he will no doubt surpass the real Riku.
It's nice having darkness on my side.
Vexen tempts the fake into facing Sora, Repliku eagerly accepting the challenge.
I intend to make good use of you.
No worries. The real Riku is nothing. Sora won't be either. They're no match for me.
Meanwhile, Ansem reappears to taunt Riku on B7 on his fear of the dark. Giving him the other half of the card worlds, Riku continues to wipe the floor with bosses the player has already conquered as Sora. Hence the lack of any real descriptor on gameplay here. Riku's slides take out massive amounts of health out of the bosses, and is generally much easier to strike them compared to how varied Sora's strategies could be. So it's generally an easier time. Returning to a familiar scene, Vexen shows up to Axel and Larxene with his replica. Larxene familiar with Vexen's various experiments, much to her annoyance. As Axel hands over the Disney Islands world card to Vexen, Repliku learns about their intent on remaking his heart to better match the real thing.
Memories. Maybe we can get her to make you forget you're nothing but a fake. In other words, we'll remake your heart so you can be exactly the same as the real Riku, okay?
You want to remake my heart? The real Riku is a wimp who's afraid of the dark. What do I want with the heart of a loser?
Any objections, Vexen? After all, you do want to test Sora, don't you?
After angrily fighting back against his fate, unaware of Vexen's meaning of making good use of him earlier, Larxene easily swats the replica away. Naminé watches in shock as Larxene forcibly beats Repliku into submission. Or at least that's how I took it. The scene is vague, but the loss of free will and agency is felt regardless.
Stupid little toy. Think you could defeat me? Where would you ever get a thought like that? But look on the bright side. Along with everything else in your head, Naminé will erase the memory of me knocking you flat. Instead, she will implant the loveliest little memories you could ever hope for. It's no big deal that they're all lies.
No.
Later on, Larxene plays with Naminé's emotions, which later showcases how much Repliku is fully embracing his role as the real Riku. Expressing her appreciation for Naminé's ability to transform objects using her memory magic, Naminé holds steadfast that Sora will never truly forget Kairi, as she is simply her shadow. Every memory that Naminé lays of herself on top of Kairi's only further increases Sora's affection for his actual friend, Larxene snapping back that the fact Naminé is in Kairi's shadow should be the incentive she needs to keep at it. Later on, Lexaeus reports that Vexen was struck down by Axel, an action Zexion is displeased with. Worried that Sora is growing ever stronger even while under Naminé's control, they realize full well they cannot eliminate Sora.
For our superior, he is in dire need of the hero of light.
As Riku completes the last of his memory floors, he is greeted by Lexaeus and his sword axe, the stalwart mountain of a man choosing to utilize Riku to combat Sora's ever-increasing danger.
I, Lexaeus, will not yield to the frail heart of an infantile coward. Now, stop resisting, and let the darkness in.
And now we get to a new boss fight. Lexaeus is insanely powerful, as his build suggests, his entire moveset revolving around telegraphed but deadly hits, and is able to power himself up if he is left alone to complete his slights. Efficient use of dark mode and Riku's own slights will quickly put an end to Lexaeus' threat, and prevent his power-ups from ever occurring. enough that I didn't even witness his element. It's ground, by the way, in my most recent playthrough. After the dust settles, Lexaeus manages to slam Riku into the ceiling, confident that he won.
You were too much trouble.
Unfortunately, Ansem awakes within Riku and strikes Lexaeus down, leaving 2 organization members down for the count.
Too slow. You are the superiors. Forgive me, Zexion. This was a fight I should not have started.
Huh.
I see you now, clearly.
Huh?
In his mind, Riku realizes in horror that Ansem has begun to control his body yet again, the mere memory of such a dark being enough to summon the Seeker of Darkness. Riku's fear of Ansem's resurrection is accelerating his actual return, though the king once again returns in the nick of time and bails Riku out of his trance. While not physically there yet, Riku senses Mickey's presence, signaling that he's not too far off from the youth. Zexion laments Lexaeus' defeat as Axel appears after faking his death to Sora, reporting Larxine's demise as well. The two seem to be on better terms with each other than other members, taking bets on Marluxia being the 4th and next one to fall.
I thought perhaps it might be you.
Me? No way. I already took my pounding from Sora. He thinks I'm done for good. Nope, I think it'll be Marluxia next. For defying the organization and targeting Sora. I hope he moves exactly as his heart commands him to. So, what about you? I thought you guys had plans for Riku.
Yes, we were going to set him off against the traitors. But with Marluxia gone, there is no more need. He is nothing but a nuisance now.
And he's dangerous as well. After all, he took down Lexaeus.
You know, that is not how I do things. Tell me, did you obtain the data on Riku's home?
What? One of the senses died. A really strong one. Huh?
The keeper of this castle, Marluxia, has just been felled by the Keyblade Master.
Keyblade? You mean Sora? Sora is here?
Yes.
With Marluxia meeting his end soon after, Zexion decides to visit Riku to report that Sora is indeed in the castle. Throwing him the Destiny Islands map card, Riku steps forward in an attempt to finally see his friends again, laughing off how comforting the islands he once thought of as a prison not too long ago. Riku runs off to greet Tidus, Wakka, and Yuffie. The 3 non-respondent and revealing themselves to be mere illusions. The same happens with Akairi before Zexion appears in front of the Hero of Darkness. Claiming Riku has forgotten his own actions, Zexion accuses Riku of destroying and dooming every inhabitant of his islands, summoning a dark side as a representation of the dark being Riku became that night.
Sora, it's me.
After another fight with a giant Heartless, Riku sees Sora at the edge of the arena, a door appearing should the player take the hint and level up or save before initiating the next scene. Sora attacks Riku soon after, claiming Riku is a creature of the dark, firing off a beam of light to prove his point.
Have you really become a creature of the dark? It's time for you to face the light!
Within this blinding light, Riku is visited by Kairi, convinced he's truly fading away. Kairi urges Riku that he cannot be defeated by either the light nor the dark, as he is a being of both. She urges him to embrace his own brand of dark strength without succumbing to it.
It'll show you the way to your friends.
Can I face them?
You don't want to?
You know I do. Of course. And I will. With my strength. My dark strength. Darkness!
After reappearing like a boss in a permanent dark mode, Riku's odd talent for smelling out the scent of darkness proving a boon here, a battle with Zexion gets initiated. Fun fact, this fight with Zexion originally wasn't playable in the original GBA game, so until Recom released, fans didn't know how Zexion fought.
And I shall make you see that your hopes are nothing but a mere illusion!
Remakes can really be great things when they can fill in gaping holes in gameplay here, such as skimping out on an obvious boss fight many would have liked to have faced. Zexion fights with magical lexicons, embracing a bunch of warping attacks as well as attempting to steal Riku's cards for himself. Constant use of slights and card breaks are highly recommended here, especially if you focused on topping off your AP at every level up. After the battle, Zexion retreats to their unknown basement headquarters. Seeing the replica, Zexion gasps in legit terror before realizing that the real Riku didn't track him down this quickly. Expecting to use the fake to combat the real thing, Axel instead builds upon his ending scene during Sora's credits, urging Repliku to gain power that the real Riku doesn't possess, to finally become his own self.
If you can get that, you can be a new person, not Riku, nor anybody else. You won't just be a copy of someone, you will be unique, your own self.
Sharing a similar goal with Naminé, the replica approaches Zexion and absorbs his entire being, power and all, leaving Axel the only surviving member of the incident here in Castle Oblivion, as far as organization members go. What a wild card.
You just found out way too much.
At the entrance hall of B2, Ansem attempts to possess Riku yet again, seizing the opportunity to capitalize on Riku's overflowing darkness. Before he can, the king himself finally shows up in the flesh, much to the relief of an exhausted Riku. Mickey reveals that a Twilight Town map card appeared to him in the Realm of Darkness, connecting him to Riku. Looks like someone is trying to help them out in their own way. Stepping through the door into the town of Perpetual Sunset, Riku puts up his guard as Ansem seemingly appears before the 15-year-old once again. Almost immediately, however, Riku calls out the figure before him.
You're not the true Ansem. Your scent is different. The Ansem in my heart smells darker. The odor is more foul. But your scent just isn't that. It's not darkness. It's something else. I finally understand. You're the one who guided me when it started. You came to me pretending to be Ansem. You gave me the card to make me face the darkness.
That is correct.
"'Tis, or so I am known. I've watched you all along.
Really? Who are you? And what do you want from me?
For you to choose.
Choose?
You are a special entity. You exist between light and dark. You stand in the twilight. You are to meet Naminé, then choose.
Naminé? Who's that?
You will know soon.
After that bit of intrigue, Riku eventually winds up in front of the same mansion where Vexen met his end earlier. Before he's able to enter, the replica walks up to realize Riku has finally embraced the darkness, with some grade A writing.
How can you tell? Because I'm you. No, I'm me. I'm me, he says.
All joking aside, I'm really beginning to feel the plight of these kids going through existential crises, even when some of them aren't even real people. Kingdom Hearts, everybody! Riku will be at his most aggressive, similar to his final match with Sora and his permanent Dark Hand. This is very much a proper Dark Link fight, as I like to call them. Conquer yourself for the resolution in the form of a cutscene. The replica, accepting his death as inevitable, concludes that his entire being, heart and feelings alike, are fated to disappear forever, feeling that none of this might even be real. Riku attempts to console his shadow as he fades away into darkness. Making his way up to the 13th floor, maybe? Riku meets up with Naminé as she shows the sleeping Sora, filling Riku in on Sora's decision and her involvement within Castle Oblivion's events. While Riku's memories weren't altered, Naminé offers to lock Riku's heart to prevent Ansem's eventual and inevitable return. Since Naminé can lock away Riku's darkness only by locking away his memory of said darkness, Riku rejects her offer, preferring to utilize and trust in his own darkness. Naminé hoping for this answer, that Riku would eventually accept himself. Riku admits he recognized her as she took the visage of Kairi earlier. The nose knows, you know? So either by progressing to B1 or going all the way back down, it is vague. It could be that Sora's memory pod was always located in B2, but this is why you don't ask me about these kind of sort of details, because I'm crazy enough to overthink stupid things like that. Riku meets back up with Mickey, having been filled in on the details from the mysterious newcomer Diz. The king senses he's met Diz before, but can't quite place why or where, though he does choose to trust the Bandage Man, since he isn't hostile. To further prove his apparent honorable intentions, Diz gifts Riku and Mickey the same black cloaks the organization members wear. Time for some lore. These stylish robes are used by these so-called nobodies to hide their presence and protects them from being consumed by the darkness they travel in.
Sneak up on you if they sense your presence. However, this cloak that is worn by nobodies will render their eyes and their noses useless. The ears, not so.
While Riku has no intention of running away from his own darkness, Diz has him a card for the first basement floor to allow him to face Ansem head-on. At the final entrance hall of the game, Mickey offers his help, to which Riku attempts to decline, instead requesting that should things go sour, the king should destroy him. Mickey ain't having none of that, though.
I'll be right there to save you.
Huh? No, that's not it. I want you to destroy—
No way! No matter what happens, I'm gonna be right there to help you. I promise you that.
I smell you, Ansem.
The very short floor does indeed have Riku quickly meeting up in the final room, Ansem appearing to compliment Riku's increased mastery of the darkness. After a little bit of smack-talking, the final fight of the game begins, echoing the first game's finale, but from Riku's perspective.
That's not
I love that organ.
The truth is, I just can't stand your foul stench.
Ansem's a fitting test of Riku's mechanics, the game wisely handing the player a bunch of high-value cards, incentivizing slights and especially card duels. The arena is large enough to make full use of every slight, especially Dark Aura, which I must say is very satisfying to use against enemies instead of being attacked with it. While Ansem can hit hard, if you have a firm grasp on Chain of Memories' combat system, it should be a satisfying match of card breaks and dark slights. Eventually, Riku emerges victorious. Despite his threats of returning, Ansem fades away once again, Riku blacking out into darkness, the king once again coming to the rescue of a worn-out Riku. Asking what Riku plans on doing next while Sora regains his memories, Mickey expresses how being around Riku has changed his overall mind on darkness, believing Riku is a unique being and how light and darkness seemingly mingle together with him. They leave Castle Oblivion on good terms, Riku on a first-name basis with Mickey Mouse. I still think that's kinda cool, as childish as that sounds. And then the final official scene of the game plays.
What are you making me choose now?
Between the road to light and the road to darkness.
Neither suits me. I'm taking the middle road.
Do you mean the twilight road to nightfall?
No. It's the road to dawn.
And that's Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. It's a pretty vital chapter story-wise for any fan of the original game and the series in general, and for those who want full context as to how and why Kingdom Hearts 2 begins the way it does. As the chapter bridging two mainline installments, Recom is definitely a game I suggest new players at least try out. The combat isn't for everyone admittedly, but I do find it rewarding in its own number-based way, though the combat did click with me. And the systems utilized here weren't forgotten about. They actually return in future installments in altered forms, and I will address them in due time when we hit them. So don't worry if it doesn't quite click here. It just might in 2 of the upcoming games. Regardless of the gameplay, the story itself is definitely worth a watch, so if you can't get into the cards, at least watch the cutscenes. If you somehow go into Chain of Memories blind and without spoilerific knowledge of Kingdom Hearts 2, or 358 Days Over 2, you may enjoy the mysteries and hints set up here to be expanded upon in Kingdom Hearts 2. By making it a more personalized story focusing on both Sora and Riku and their various relationships and inner struggles, it hopefully helps endear these characters before the long-awaited sequel answers a chunk of this game's questions and then some. All that being said, Chain of Memories isn't a flawless game, and I'd still recommend Kingdom Hearts Final Mix above it if you cannot fully embrace the card-based systems. But I do think it is often unfairly ignored by the uninitiated as an unimportant spin-off title, when it's more of the middle chapter of an opening trilogy. What occurs inside the halls of Castle Oblivion is very much canon, even if Sora, Donald, and Goofy's memories of the events here are wiped away. It's a clever way to have everyone mostly on the same page by the time Kingdom Hearts 2 rolls around, but Riku, Mickey, Naminé, Axel, and Diz are all characters that didn't have their memories taken from them. You'll gain a great head start during the infamous opening of the mainline sequel, knowing the events of this game, and if you've stuck around this long to me repeating these same things over and over again, you'll be glad to know I'm almost done. While the Game Boy Advance original title was solidly received, the PS2 remake actually received lower scores by a lot of outlets. While normally I don't put too much stock in review scores because at the end of the day those are simply arbitrary numbers, and a reason why you've never heard me actually give any scores to these games I'm reviewing. Because if you only care about my number or a score or a letter and not what I say, you're missing my point. I'd rather talk for hours on something I enjoy and have someone take away something on why I care about these things so much, or what I did and didn't like of something, rather than saying, oh, it's good. Because anyone can tell me something's good or bad. I care about why. So while scores are just arbitrary numbers, much like everyone else's opinion obviously, it is useful to somewhat gauge the reception of a title from the quote-unquote big-name reviewers out there. While by no means reviewing badly, the remake is far and away the better experience as far as I'm concerned. It addresses so many quality of life improvements that the original was lacking due to hardware limitations that I would recommend it over the GBA version 9 times out of 10. Only suggesting fans check out the original GBA game if you're curious or are a collector of advanced games. Or if you really want to be that guy, seeing in the original localization, Axel actually used the word hell, how scandalous. But in all seriousness, the remake is definitely the way to go. Not only because it keeps in line with the style of the franchise going forward, with full 3D models, important cutscenes being fully voice acted, and much more options in terms of controls, but because the added story beats and developments are canon, similar to how Final Mix supplemented the original vanilla release of the first game. Besides, being bundled in the 1.5 HD Remix collection and now the 1.5 plus 2.5 PS4 releases, there's little chance a newer player can miss this title now, especially since it sits neatly after the first game on this main selection menu. The story is a nice lead-in to Kingdom Hearts 2, which alone makes it worth checking out. I know the collections now show Days as the next title before Kingdom Hearts 2, but I am going through this series in release order. Days technically does slot in perfectly between Chain of Memories here and Kingdom Hearts 2, but it does spoil a few of the mysteries and reveals that 2 deals with, so I abide by the order the games were released in. Hopefully newcomers got a glimpse at why Recom is more important than its origins might suggest, and to any returning fans out there, admire how restrained I was dealing with these mysteries. I have already talking about much of the lore and lingering questions in this video, because all of that and more will be discussed in the Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix Retrospective Analysis video. Hope to see you there so I can line the pieces up. See you next video.